Wednesday committee day meeting to order. At this time, I open the meeting, the executive committee. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded to the public. Recording of the meeting will be available www.ncwildlife.gov. At this time, I'm calling Margo Mitchell for a roll call. Margo.
Good morning. I'll do a roll call for our executive committee members. Committee Chair Monty Crump.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Mark Gregg.
Here.
David Hoyle.
Here.
John Coley.
Here.
Wes Seegers.
Here.
Tom Berry.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And at this time, I'll consider a motion to go into closed session to the North Carolina Statutes 143-318. Point 11A6 to review the executive director's job performance for 24-25. I consider a motion to go in closed session at this time.
So moved.
Motion to the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're now going to closed session. And we'll adjourn to the executive director's office to continue the committee meeting. For the executive committee, come back in open session. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, we're back in the open session. And at this time, we know further business to conduct by the executive committee. The meeting is adjourned and we'll move on to the next committee. Mr. Chairman of the Voting Safety Committee, floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Meeting in stream live and public record. A recorded meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.gov. Call on Ms. Margo Minkler for roll call.
Good morning. I'm going to do a roll call for our voting safety committee members. Committee Chair J.C. Cole.
Present.
Committee Vice Chair Ray Clifton. Committee Member John Coley. Committee Member Hayden Rogers. Committee Member Mike Alford.
Here.
Committee Member Tom Haslett.
Here.
Chairman, you have the quorum.
This time we'd like to call on Betsy Haywood to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Today, we have two proposals to publish notice of text with an open comment period and a public hearing for a no-wake zone in the city of Hickory and then several in Davidson County. First, in Exhibit F1, the Wildlife Resources Commission received an application for rulemaking and a certified resolution from the city of Hickory for rulemaking to enlarge a no-wake zone shore to shore on Lake Hickory from a point 50 yards southwest of the US Highway 321 bridge northward, past the new Riverwalk on the east shore and the Lake Hickory Pub and Marina on the west shore, and ending at a point 460 yards northeast of the bridge. Agency enforcement completed an assessment matrix, which found known hazards around the bridge that will be mitigated by starting the no-wake zone southwest of those bridge supports. This is a congested area with visual obstructions. Boat wakes have a negative effect on maneuverability there. The new Riverwalk on the east shore and an access area for non-motorized crafts on the west shore are creating hazards. The non-motorized crafts are rented from Lake Hickory Marina on the west shore, and they create hazards. Non-motorized vessels congregate around the pillars that support the Riverwalk, and included in your agenda package is actually a couple of photographs of those pillars and the Riverwalk and the congestion that's there. Wakes from the jet skis that travel near and under those Riverwalk pillars have actually swamped some of the non-motorized vessels. The current no-wake zone at the Lake Hickory Marina is only 30 yards wide. Boaters use very little caution when exiting the marina and its fuel dock that is just north of that bridge. Extending the no-wake zone shore to shore for a longer distance will mitigate multiple hazards to boater and other water recreation safety. Then Exhibit F2 for your consideration tomorrow is the fiscal note analysis that was completed for two locations in Caldwell County. The city of Hickory will implement the extended no-wake zone around the bridge, Riverwalk, and a Lake Hickory Pub and Marina. The city will purchase 5 no-wake buoys at a cost of $1,500, $300 each, and 2 land and water access staff will place the buoys at an estimated cost of approximately $140. Then at the Adam Klutz Bridge, which was previously approved for submission of notice of text, The fiscal note states a minimal cost to the Wildlife Resources Commission for the purchase and placement of 2 no-wake buoys at a cost of $600 and an expense for placement by land and water access staff of approximately $70. Moving on, Exhibit G1 is a staff request to consider publishing notice of text with an open comment period and 1 public hearing for several amendments to the Davidson County Rule on High Rock Lake, Baden Lake, Tuckertown Reservoir, and the Yadkin River. On High Rock Lake, staff requests approval to enlarge the no-wake zone that is shore to shore in a cove at Skipjack Marina. And it will include the waters from 50 yards north of approximately 75 marina docks and slips southward to include the marina fuel dock, ending at a point 50 yards south of the dock at the Raven Point Boy Scout camp near the mouth of the cove. Agency enforcement completed an assessment matrix which showed multiple hazards in this cove, including the 75 docks and slips, a fuel dock, and year-round usage of the Boy Scout camp with seasonal swimming and boaters who use the dock there. Staff continues to remove the old, vague, nonspecific language that has appeared in some rules over the years and pertain to the regulation of public docks, marinas, boat service areas, boating access areas, swim areas, and bridges and trestles. Skipjack Marina is one of those areas that was marked under this old language. As part of the revisions to the Davidson County Rule, bridges and railroad trestles, boating access areas maintained by the Wildlife Resources Commission, Cube Hydro Carolinas, and Davidson County, High Rock Boat Dock Marina, and High Rock Marina and Campground and Fuel Dock, and swim areas maintained by Cube Hydro Carolinas are listed by the address and body of water in the rule. And in your agenda package, I've highlighted in yellow all of those multiple areas that we're now putting into this rule. Also, as part of enforcement's routine review of rules to determine whether any are unnecessary, the cove on High Rock Lake at High Rock Shores Drive was determined to not meet statutory criteria for a no-wake zone. There is very little vessel traffic there, and only by residents in the cove. This one was designated as a no-wake zone more than 40 years ago. There have been no incidents and no complaints at that cove. So staff will recommend removal of this amendment from the NCAC. And then finally, Exhibit G2 is the fiscal note review for the Davidson County amendments. Davidson County will designate private entities for the replacement of buoys at the Skipjack Marina and the Boy Scout dock at no expense to the county. All other areas on the waters in Davidson County are already marked under respective agreements with the Wildlife Resources Commission, Davidson County, and Cube Hydro Carolinas. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Could you go all the way back to the Caldwell County and pull that picture back up, please?
Sure. Yes.
And this is just a question, Betsy. I don't keep going.
You want the map?
Map.
Okay.
Would we extend it past the bridge, the highway bridge, when it looks like that would be a natural
Well,
demarcation for the no-wake zone?
well,
I'm just asking.
right, I understand. I appreciate it. The current no-wake zone there is only at the Lake Hickory Marina, and it was established, the county line goes right down the middle of the lake there. And because of that, at the time, since the Lake Hickory Pub Marina was in Caldwell County, they only extended it out 30 yards instead of 50 yards. Did not include the other side of the bridge, but when enforcement went out there, they said it's a very congested area under the bridge, especially now that Riverwalk has been developed, and there are obstructions, there's sightline obstructions, and people are congregating under the bridge structures, and it's endangering other boaters. And so they were the ones who recommended it. Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Thank you. Ms. Hayward.
Thank you.
Time will call on Zilpha Sola for presentation.
Morning, everyone. I have one additional boating safety item. This is permanent rulemaking notice for 10F0307 Catawba, Iredell, Lincoln, and Mecklenburg counties, Exhibit H1 and H2 in your package. Staff were notified last fall of safety concerns and enforcement challenges surrounding vessel liveries on Lake Norman. A temporary rule was adopted to address concerns during the current boating season. The temporary rule, as well as the current proposed permanent amendments, would require vessel liveries operating on Lake Norman to conduct a pre-rental vessel safety inspection, to instruct renters on safe vessel operation, and to provide and keep documentation to ensure compliance with these rules. Permanently codifying vessel livery safety requirements in rule will clarify these standards for vessel livery companies, facilitate and streamline enforcement activities, and improve public safety. The proposed changes are identical to the temporary rule currently in effect. Staff will be recommending publishing notice of text with an open comment period and public hearing tomorrow, and I can take any questions on this at this time.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Any additional topics we need to take up for this meeting?
Good question. Big. You sent out an email about, it was New Hanover, Brunswick was having a period. Did they have that public hearing yet and made a request, or you heard anything out of that?
You know, it's interesting, the public hearing was on July 21st. And in the meantime, the county manager called me and they're really interested in having an extended no wake zone, not only around the bridge in Oak Island, but also extending back towards Southport, because there is so much activity. Well, as you all know, Corps of Engineers are the ones who either concur or don't. So far, they're not concurring with one that long, but there is a precedent. I mean, there's a long one in the ICW in New Hanover County at Wrightsville Beach. So it remains to be seen.
So that is still in flux.
Right, it's not time to bring it before you all yet, because
I just didn't know if they didn't make any progress on it, because it makes sense to the request, but I didn't know what they were doing.
maybe some of you have heard from Brunswick County yet, or you may hear from.
Yes, sir. I have nothing, man.
There being no further business, meeting adjourned.
Okay, Chairman Stone, looks like you got a busy agenda anyway. We're going to let you get an early start. But before we do that, I was remiss. We have a new commission member who was sworn in yesterday, appointed by the Commissioner of Agriculture, Justin Boyd, from Bath, North Carolina. And we went to dinner with him last night. I think he's going to be a great member. We're glad to have him on board. So y'all welcome him. Glad to have you on board, guys.
I'd like to call the Fisheries Committee to order. This meeting is being streamed live, recorded public record. Recording of the meeting is available at www.ncwildlife.gov. Marvin, would you do a roll call?
Yes, sir. Do a roll call for our fishery committee members. Committee Chair John Stone,
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Steve Wyndham,
Here.
Committee Member Tommy Bonville, Committee Member Brad Stanback, Committee Member Henry Rogers,
Here.
Committee Member Mike Alford,
Here.
ex officio members Monty Crump, Mark Craig.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have the
Meeting. Let's see. Ben Ricks can talk to us about the Central Southern Striped Bass Management.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I'm once again up in front of you guys talking about striped bass, so that's probably no surprise, but we're going to update you all on what we've been seeing, what we are seeing, and maybe some future directions. So if there's any questions, y'all let me know. Just so you know, this is a cooperative effort. We work with Division of Marine Fisheries. We work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in terms of production for the project at the moment. All the fish that we're stocking are currently coming from the hatchery in Edenton. We have stocked in the past for using Watha, but right now they're all currently coming from Edenton. And also, just want to acknowledge that the North Carolina Marina Estuary Foundation has provided funding for these efforts as well. Just a little bit of information on how we work with Division of Marine Fisheries. We now have quarterly meetings with them to talk just about striped bass, about how we want to kind of carry things forward, and that we've really worked on that relationship, and that aspect seems to be going pretty well. So as I've talked to you guys before, the striped bass and the CSMA, for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to be talking primarily about the Tar and the Neuse Rivers, but the story is the same for the Cape Fear as well. Is we have very limited reproduction. They're going through the motions, but it's not necessarily resulting in small fish swimming around in the system. We have excessive mortality, which is resulting in a truncated age structure. So the fish, just put it plainly, they're not living as long as we'd like for them to, or as they were designed to. And then in these systems, because of those two things, nearly all the fish are of hatchery origin. I'll point out that guy in the bottom, he's a haired biologist that now has lost all his hair, but he's holding a big stripe. In terms of the issue of recruitment and reproduction, we did a egg and larval survey several years ago, and we also compared that to previous studies. What we saw was the eggs were viable. They were, the striped bass were spawning, they were producing eggs, about 65%, 67% viable. And, you know, and that tracks for other populations that have fairly healthy spawning populations. However, we saw very little larval striped bass in our surveys. Also, I'd add that DMF in their seine studies in the lower river, they've documented very few juveniles. So there's likely, that kind of points us in the direction that there may be some sort of bottleneck in their early life history that's limiting them. What mechanisms that is something that we're going to be looking at as we move into the future. But that's, at least on the low end, on the young side of the equation, there seems to be a bottleneck there, because once we stock them, they seem to do fairly well. So once they get 6 to 8 inches, they do fairly well in the system, but there definitely seems to be some sort of break in the chain, so to speak. So to fix that, we have stocked right many, or a good number, as we would say down east, of striped bass in both of these systems. Since '93, we've stocked over 1 million fish, or over 2 million fish that were phase 1 and over 2 million fish that were phase 2. So we've stocked a lot of fish in this system. But again, that doesn't seem to be getting us where we wanted to be. So we're good at maintaining fish in the system, but we haven't got the population over the threshold where they could spawn effectively on their own. I mentioned before that adult mortality was an issue. You can see here we got a fish in the Tar River living to about age 8, fish in the Neuse River living to about age 9. If this was crappy data, it would be great. For striped bass, though, these fish are supposed to live 20 to 30 years. So they're just not living as long as we hoped. So to address that, in 2019, DMF put in a moratorium and a suspension of gill net operation above the ferry lines. We also have a cutoff harvest as well. So these are probably the most restrictive regulations this area has ever had in an attempt to address the mortality problems that we were having. And you can see a few years later, we got fish in the Tar River to age 7. So we may have walked backwards a little bit. We've got fish to age 9 again in the Neuse. This could also have some impacts. We've had some shortages in recent years in some of our stocking rates, but what we really didn't see, if you go back, these 6, 7, and 8s really aren't advancing to 7, 8, 9, 10s, you know, and that was what we hoped that this effort would do, but things have pretty much stayed status quo since 2019. Yes, sir.
Can you give us a little history, or give me a little history? So did both these rivers naturally have striped bass years ago that were reproducing and were thriving?
Yes, sir. So if we go way back, you know, all of our coastal rivers had some sort of level, even Lockwood Valley, Brunswick River, some of our even smaller rivers had small residual populations of striped bass. The Tar and the Neuse had historically had significant commercial landings. And we've talked about that in previous presentations to you guys. But yeah, that's definitely worth noting. Is it does seem like with you know, the dams being put in place and just the modern era, striped bass really have suffered you know, since probably, you know, really since the 50s, 60s or something. And we have stocking records that are almost that far back. And what it looked like is we'd stock a few fish, a little bit of a fishery would build up, and then they get caught out and it would fade away until we stocked a few more fish. But if you go back even further than that, you know, there was significant harvest of striped bass, at least in the like Washington and New Bern areas.
So the reproduction piece, what do you think's causing the lack of reproduction?
So that's where we need to go next. And I'll get to that if you give me just a second. So, cause I don't want to, I'll tie that in at the end if that works. So again, I said we're talking all hatchery fish. And it looks like it's almost all hatchery fish. I do want to say some of you guys may see this about 43% for the Tar River. In 2018, we did have what we think was a pretty good spawning event in the Roanoke. And so the working theory is we can tell if a fish is hatchery, but if it's wild, we can't necessarily tell exactly where it came from. That could be a low level spawning event in the Tar, although there's no evidence of that before or since, or it could be Roanoke drift. And there's probably a little bit, DMF has got some preliminary data that's suggesting that may very well be the case. But really what we're seeing is pretty consistent 80 to 90% hatchery contribution over time. So if you are fishing these systems and you catch a fish, it's likely one that we have cooperatively stocked. So when we talk about a population, we can kind of break it up into some kind of elemental components. And the main one is births. We need fish to be born into the system. And the other real important one is deaths. Fish are going to be leaving the system. That could be through, you know, old age. It could be disease. It could be through various types of fishing, hook and release mortality, you know, you name it. But fish are entering the system, fish are leaving the system, and really what you want is more fish or the same number of fish entering the system as they are leaving the system. And we also, again, I mentioned there's some evidence of some seasonal migration into the lower rivers, but we also don't have a whole lot of evidence of these fish leaving the system. So it's not like we're stocking them and they show up, you know, in the Roanoke or, you know, in Wilmington or something like that. I mean, it does happen at a very low level, but not at a level that we would need to manage around. But so really to sum things up, to manage a self-sustaining population, we need births, and we don't have enough of those. We need deaths, and there's too many of them because fish aren't living as long as they're supposed to. You know, they're dying by the time they're about age 9. We have no evidence that they're leaving. We have some evidence that it's seasonal, but really this whole model breaks down for striped bass and the tar and the noose, because we're having to supplement with hatchery and we're not making our recovery gains. You know, the original strategy would be we would stock, and essentially we would ultimately put ourselves out of the business in terms of stocking, where the fish would be able to reach a threshold where they could support themselves. And what we're seeing really is that that's not happening. And so we're in this situation where we don't have the big fish and we don't have the little fish. So it's this chicken or egg scenario we're in, where if we had more larger, older fish, maybe we would be able to produce more fry that would add to the population, be able to have enough eggs produced on the spawning grounds to get a foothold in. But we don't have the big fish, and we need the small fish to make the big fish. So we're kind of, in terms of management, we're cut off because of a life history bottleneck on the low end, and then our fish aren't living long enough on the top end. So what we're really doing, you know, if we had a fully fleshed out age structure, a fully self-sustaining population, we would see fish of all these sizes, and you can see the number of eggs that each female of that size would produce. And it's obviously significant once you get to those older fish. But what we're doing right now is we're really counting on age 3s and age 6s to make a population. And that's just not something that's going to be sustainable. So given that reality, that's the reality that we're in, and we've stocked for almost 30 years now. We are not currently meeting recovery goals. We're very good at maintaining fish in the system, maintaining angling opportunities. It's both rivers have very popular striped bass fisheries. If we were going to maintain a recovery strategy, really our options are fairly limited. You can't reduce harvest any more than closed season can get. So we need to think about how we're going to manage this so that we're managing in the reality of the situation that we're in. It's not really now that we know what we know, it's not really fair to call it a recovery project. It's more we're maintaining a population. The reasons why we would like to maintain a population is, one, to provide anglers opportunity, and two, we want to continue to study the things that we talked about earlier. Why these fish are not, what the bottlenecks are. Is it a water quality issue? Is it a habitat issue? We do not have the ability to manipulate flows near as much as we do on the Roanoke. So that's not going to be a solution that presents itself, but it could be that there's some other mechanism that we need to shift our priorities to in terms of addressing that. Well, if these fish are not, if they're laying eggs, why isn't that? Is it because it's abundance? Do we just need more eggs? Or is there also something that's limiting them? So in that meantime, we want to continue to stock fish, but we want to shift to a management option that allows us to provide opportunity to anglers. So what you may see in the near future is a limited do no harm type season. And basically that would be a short season, and it would be the same in both rivers. We're working cooperatively with DMF right now to try to have the same rule across all the jurisdictions, and we'll see kind of how that shakes out as we continue to talk with them. Also, because of hatchery limitations at Edenton, we're switching to a 2 years on, 1 year off strategy for stocking. Our recommendation is that should be plenty to accomplish the goals that we're talking about now. We're still talking about at this moment, phase 2 is 100,000 a year when we stock it. Again, you'll see, we will likely bring a temporary rule notice to you in the October meeting. Again, we're working well with DMF to try to get the rule to be consistent to avoid regulatory confusion across jurisdictions. And also this season will account for the fact that DMF is seeing Roanoke fish in the lower Tar and Noose. And so we would likely set the season up to avoid that interactions with those Roanoke fish as much as possible. I don't think it's possible to remove that in its entirety, but we could set it up during the spawn and run when the Roanoke fish should be back in the general Roanoke area. And with that, I'd open it up to questions.
Ben,
Yes, sir.
in your whole thing, I didn't hear you mention water quality but one time, maybe twice. PFAS, everything that's coming down the river. Have we looked into to what degree have we looked into water quality? And of course, I'm talking about Cape Fear. But what have we really looked at as to, mercury content, all the chemicals, everything like that? Can that be having an effect on the eggs developing going forward?
So what we've done is we've done some preliminary work, and we have documented that there is maternal transport. So the PFAS that comes out of the water, and that the the females are exposed to, we have documented that there is a transfer of that to the eggs. Now, that's, when I said preliminary, now I'm done talking. Yeah, but so that's the next question is, what does that mean in terms of, is it or is it not related to this recruitment issue, or is that just a separate issue to think about, you know? So, and it also could be any number of things, and it's likely not, you know, it's probably an additive thing. And what we would like to do, if possible, is figure out what are the variables that are the most influential and try to see if we could address those. You know, that may or may not be possible. But that's kind of where we're going, is it does seem like it could be, we don't know what it is, in all honesty, you know, and that's what we want to do, is shift that and start asking those questions. Is it water quality? Is it something else? What could it be? And that's limiting us. Why, instead of it being a recovery project, we really want to answer the question of why can't we recover them through somewhat standard methods of doing this? So, yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do we post, on our kiosks and all the boat put-ins? I know we used to, I haven't seen it lately, fish advisories on the type we're not supposed to eat from point A to point, you know, C on the Cape Fear or any of these river systems.
Well, right now, in terms of PFAS, the Cape Fear is the only one that has a consumption advisory. But yeah, we have links on our webpage. We have, you know, I get calls and emails about it all the time, but we generally refer those questions to the Department of Health and Human Services, because they're the ones that are making that recommendation. We help them do the sampling sometimes, but that falls to their wheelhouse. And so,
I understand that. Let's go back. Signs on where we put the boats in, where our constituents put boats in. Do we have a warning system by Health and Human Services that don't eat black bass, don't eat crab?
I don't think it's posted like that at the boat ramps. I mean, it may be at some but we haven't made an effort on our end to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are you seeing this in other species? Is this unique to the striped bass and these rivers? And the reason I ask, I mean, as we all know, you usually have sort of, you know, canary type species where you see warnings and troubles if it's environmental water quality. Typically, striped bass is not the most sensitive of those species.
Right.
If we're having trouble with it, I assume we're having trouble with others. Is that true or no?
Striped bass are probably the lead problem in terms of this. There are some issues across the eastern seaboard with low spawning events and poor year class success. So it's not totally unique to the tar and the noose. Is that going to be something that rolls into other species? I mean, that's a valid question, but right now the shads seem to be doing very well in the tar and the noose river. So, you know, a lot of us would think that shad may be more susceptible, but they seem to be doing fine. So there's a different mechanism that's impacting the striped bass than it would be the shad. Yes, sir.
15, 16 years ago, there wasn't enough water flow in the noose. A lot of the eggs, the lack of oxygenation, just were not surviving. And I know we were trying to work out a deal with the Corps of Engineers to release water at that critical time, Falls Lake, to oxygenate, so we'd have a better hatch and recruitment of those fish. Has that gone anywhere? I know at the time they really pushed back and didn't want to release the water from a recreational standpoint, not a federal drinking water.
Right.
Any improvement on that at all?
I would say yes, but the limiting factor is the ability to manipulate. So our Anadromous coordinator, Jeremy McCargo, is talking with the Corps engineers weekly about flow rates and what the fish are doing, and where available, when there's water to manipulate, we do the best we can to try to accommodate that. So
I would say that's an improvement, because my recollection was they were not interested in our problem back at 15, 16 years ago. That was our problem, even though they were the ones holding the water. But
Right.
they had taken a really hard line, but it sounds like we've got a better relationship now. Is that correct?
That is correct. We do. And the other thing to think about in terms of striped bass, I mean, this is a fish that's supposed to live 20 years. So in a 20-year time scale, one poor year class shouldn't be the death knell. You know, it should, if in 20 years, if they get 3 successful spawns off, you should have a growing population. If they get more than that, should be really good. And that's why the history of striped bass management shows that they can be fairly resilient, is because when they do have a good year class, generally they can get a foothold in and build off of that.
I'm good. Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Ben, when recreational fishermen are catch and release, any idea what percentage of those fish don't make it?
It is completely is not the right word. It's very related to water temperature. There's a lot of variables at play. Air temperature also, you know, the hotter the water in the air are, the more they are stressed out. So this time of year, your hooking mortality would be fairly high. In February, it would be fairly low. You know, we typically, in terms of hooking mortality, apply a fairly standard rate of about 10%. Seems to be kind of an average for most species. We are doing a hook and release mortality study at this very moment on the Roanoke. So that would also kind of help us explain that a little bit further, because those variables are going to be comparable on the Noose as they are in the Roanoke. So
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the results of that study in the future.
sure.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Now we're going to have a report on post-Hurricane Helene floodplain recovery resiliency. Scott, how do you pronounce your last name? Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Chairman. So Scott Loftus, Inland Fisheries Division, been in the mountain region for my entire career. Just a little bit about myself. Started out as a Bio 1 in District 9, then District Fisheries Biologist, then Habitat Restoration Coordinator with the Habitat Conservation Program, then moved back over to Inland Fisheries Division, and also moonlight at times as the Warm Water Research and Survey Coordinator. So you may have seen me talk about muskie or walleye or bass genetics even. So, but today we want to highlight some floodplain restoration projects that the Wildlife Commission's been involved in with partners over the last 5 or 6 years. And so with the recent events this past September with Hurricane Helene in the mountains, thought maybe the appropriate title is, flood resiliency, and is there a silver bullet? Excuse me. So just a little bit of background first. So the French Broad River has had several floods of records, starting back 1916, back-to-back hurricanes. So that's they were remnant tropical storms, 29, and then Ivan and Francis, which many of us probably remember in 2004, Hurricane Fred, 2021, and then of course more recently Helene last September. So I want to just briefly talk about Helene last year and have a before and after picture of the Swannanoa River. This is the Swannanoa just upstream of Biltmore. Folks that have been to Asheville probably been at the four-way there in Biltmore where McDonald's and the hotel is. It's kind of the central point there in town. This is just upstream of that. And the point is really not to show the commercial and residential damage of before and after. You can see the missing buildings. It was obviously catastrophic. But it's to demonstrate that this river is confined on both sides. The floodplain is built out from Swannanoa River Road on one side and another city road on the left, and all the commercial and residential development in the floodplain. moving just upstream of Asheville, last 5 years, like I said, we've been involved with Conserving Carolina, a local nonprofit conservation organization in acquiring and restoring floodplain properties. Each one of these properties are in the 100-acre or so size. Mud Creek being closest to the Asheville Airport, Kings Bridge upstream about 3 miles, and then Pleasant Grove, which was a defunct golf course venture during the downturn around 08, 09 that Conserving Carolina also acquired. It's near the Henderson, Transylvania County line, just to orient you where we are there. All of that is upstream of Asheville. So for today's presentation, we wanted to focus on the Kings Bridge restoration. So just a little bit of background about Kings Bridge. It was acquired, the Wildlife Commission acquired it from Conserving Carolina in 2021. Conserving Carolina had made a conservation purchase there from an ag producer. It was in a sod farm. It was getting wet enough, frequent enough that it wasn't suitable for sod production any longer, so that they sold it to Conserving Carolina. We got it. Big shout out to the front office and of course Shannon Deaton for securing the funds to allow the Wildlife Commission to purchase that property. It was actually through Duke Energy coal ash mitigation funds that we were awarded the entire purchase price of the property. A little over $400,000. Didn't cost the commission a dime, and it was placed into the wildlife conservation area program with the commission. So a few things on the property when we acquired it was, again, it's 90 acres, significant berming along the French Broad River. So that's just a high bump, in, 4 to 6 feet high that a lot of times in ag operation you do to try to keep field from getting as wet as frequent as it might when there are high water events. And then of course you want to get the water off of the flat surface and in a ditch and conveyed downstream as quickly as possible, because the whole point of that is trying to have as much usable land as the property can support. So we have the berming and the ditching here in the central portion of the property. It's like it's kind of a U-shaped going. The Y's in the center, and this is looking north, so it's running basically south to north. So we engaged in a stream restoration design, permitting. It's a lengthy process. Took us about 2 years from acquisition through design and permitting to actually then contract with the contractor to get out there and implement the strategy or the vision of restoring this floodplain to somewhat of a more natural function than what it had been in the past 100 years. Project was completed in September of 2024. So simple math there is like, well, that's when Helene hit. So we actually still had equipment on the property when the hurricane hit September 27th. Again, we wanted to breach the berms. You can see the berm breach areas here and here. Both of those are about 150 linear feet each. The central ditching that was trapezoidal channel about 6 feet deep and 4 feet wide, we plugged it in a number of places along its reach on both arms, and then about 300 feet of solid plug where it dumped into a little trib to retain that water and make it function more as a wetland instead of just a conduit to get water off of the surface. Those are two things that we accomplished. the third being this 2.5 acre backwater slope. All right, so it was just prior to the Hurricane Helene, the Habitat Conservation Program actually was on a plenary retreat in the area, and they stopped by on the 25th. So this picture here is WRC staff at one of the burn breaches 2 days prior to the hurricane. And this is a view of the looking upstream at the 2.5 acre slope. So that was before the flood. This is 3 weeks after the flood. This aerial engineering calculations, we were 12 feet underwater on this floodplain. That's a lot of water. Over 15 million gallons of water was retained on this floodplain. You see some of the green grass in the prior pictures. Well, it's all brown now from just deposition on that floodplain during that flood event, but you can still see the wetland areas here and slough, and of course the burn breach there, all intact. So when the floods receded and we got, we went around checking our projects, we were really excited to see that water coming up and water spreading out is less impactful than particularly on, I think the key is on natural areas versus even when it comes up and spreads out on developed areas. But we didn't have that torrent of water rushing downstream either. It's a little flatter, it spreads out, gives that water a place to go. Same points here, but just looking in a different direction, give you another perspective of what the site, what the property, the Kingsbridge Wildlife Conservation Area looks like. So just in summary, the site is a wildlife conservation area where staff from numerous programs with the agency are engaged in assessing and monitoring the habitats and the animals that rely on those habitats, whether it be bat acoustics or eBird. It's already a really popular place for folks with birding interests to go and see what different kinds of birds they can find there in Henderson County. The slough monitoring is the fish division. We're doing muskie, and aquatic diversity program is got about 6 species of native fish in the French Broad River that they've also tagged, that we're detecting on with the biomark pit tag detection antenna that you see here. It's a nice picture lower left here of waterfowl in the floodplain area. You can see that that's just germinated cover crop we put on just like the very end of construction with some straw. So it's really fresh, and the birds found it pretty quick. But anyway, I guess, so is there a silver bullet maybe to make an attempt to tie this together? So I think comparing that Biltmore example to this wildlife conservation area example, there's a lot of economic impact in floods and things of that nature. We see there in Biltmore, we didn't experience that. These wildlands that we're working on restoring floodplains. So from a economics standpoint, I would argue that the $400 and some thousand we spent to purchase that property was well invested. It's not only was resilient during the flood, but it's long-term benefits to wild species in the state of North Carolina and certainly our constituency. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Well, Scott, your presentation was so good. You answered all their questions.
I'd like to think that was the case, but throw a hard question out here too. I appreciate those. If anybody has one or see me afterwards, we'll talk about it some more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good presentation. Kelsey Roberts is going to present the reservoir striped bass and Bodie bass management.
Morning, everybody. Today I'm going to present some highlights on our reservoir striped bass and Bodie bass management plan. But before I get started, I just want to acknowledge some of the other folks that worked on this plan, who are part of the committee: Casey Jobert, TJ Johnson, Kirk Rundle, and Paul Wheeler. So to give a little bit of background about the program, originally it was started as a way to provide an opportunity for anglers, unique angling opportunities across the entire state. Typically, I think people think of striped bass obviously as a coastal species, but with this program, folks in the mountains are able to, now fish for striped bass. So this program goes way back. We stocked our first reservoir in 1949 with striped bass. In the 70s, we began stocking Bodie bass. And because of their biology and their habitat requirements, these species don't typically reproduce naturally when they're in reservoir systems. So they're what we call put, grow, and take fishery. And basically all that means is they wouldn't exist if we weren't stocking them. So to maintain their populations, it takes a lot of active and adaptive management on our part. Currently, we stock striped bass in 11 reservoirs and Bodie bass in 6 reservoirs. So our current management strategy, like I said, is very adaptive. We are continuously monitoring these populations, and then based on the biological data that we collect, we make recommendations for changes in stocking or regulations. It's also very individualized, and up until now, we've taken it on a case-by-case basis, reservoir by reservoir. And as North Carolina has grown and as the program has grown and expanded, we've just more recently come to realize that we really needed a more centralized management strategy, and we needed to continue to support evidence-based management decisions. And we also realized that, with the increasing population in North Carolina, we needed to hear from our anglers more and incorporate their opinions into our management strategies. And then lastly, we wanted to have a plan for how to continue the success of this program, but then also how to enhance it and grow it in the future. So we needed a management plan. So our initial committee goals in creating this plan were to completely evaluate the current program, and then to use the plan to support scientific management and provide concrete recommendations for the program moving forward. We first convened in March 2022, and I believe we already presented on the angler opinion survey that we did, but we created an angler opinion survey and then implemented that in August 2023. And then most recently, a draft of the management plan was completed in June. And should it be voted on, it will be adopted in October. So the plan is broken down into 4 major program areas that we felt were really important for the management of these species and reservoirs. And within each program area, we chose several different sections that we wanted to fully evaluate. We felt like we needed to evaluate to be able to make recommendations. So for fish management program area, we had 5 different sections, and I won't, go into the nitty-gritty details of all the analysis we did, but we did a lot of work on the front end, really compiling biological data that we've had for the last 20 years, habitat data, how we're sampling these fish, what we want our goals to be, and then, we evaluated all of that to produce recommendations. So for habitat, we just had one section where we compiled data from DEQ, water quality data from DEQ, and we created habitat suitability categories that we then applied to every population and reservoir that we're currently stocking to see if they met those habitat suitability categories criteria. And then for Angler Dynamics, we created and implemented that Angler survey. And for research, we primarily just focused on research that we felt we needed to really be able to make management decisions in the future, and then how we were storing and sharing data within our agency. So for the recommendations, I'm just going to briefly go over them. There's definitely a lot more detail in the plan, but we have limited time today. So for fish management, through our angler opinion survey, one of the things that we discovered was that proximity to a stocking location was a potential barrier for people who are already fishing for these species in reservoirs. And then it was, also for folks who are not fishing for these species. So our recommendation is really to evaluate the distribution of resources across the state in proximity to where our anglers are or where our population centers are, just to make sure that any one angler doesn't have to travel too far to get to a stocked location. Through the survey as well, no surprise, but people wanted more bigger fish. They wanted more trophy opportunities, and this was built into the plan with developing different goals for each reservoir. And there's certain ways we can manage populations so that we can increase the likelihood of there being trophy fish versus, maybe just catching a bunch of fish if that's your goal. We also evaluated certain reservoirs where switching to stocking Bodie bass might be a good idea based on the fact that, maybe striped bass don't thrive in that reservoir. So we really looked at each reservoir individualistically as well to make recommendations for what our current program is doing. And then we worked a lot with the hatcheries to sort of identify what needs they had and what they felt would really help them moving forward to not only increase their efficiency, but their capacity. So if we're going to be asking for more fish, then we need to, work with the hatcheries to be able to provide them with what they need, because they're really the baseline of this entire program. For habitat, as we were evaluating habitat suitability across the state, we recognize that, though we are not the agency that's tasked with assessing water quality and collecting water quality data, we do feel like we could more regularly compile that data and assess it for our current populations, but then develop a way to standardize a collection method within our own agency for when we are proposing new reservoirs, to make sure that that habitat is suitable before we put new fish into new reservoirs. For Angler Dynamics, this was kind of a large section, I would say. And from our survey, one of the biggest shocks, or at least it was surprising to me, was that about half of our anglers who fish for these species in reservoirs had no idea that the commission was stocking these fish. So that to me was a very easy, low-hanging recommendation to make, that we need to do a better job raising awareness for all the hard work that we're doing. And through the survey, we also found that people who were more aware that we were the ones doing the stocking were also more satisfied with the program. So not only, increasing awareness is only going to do good things, in my opinion. We also found that folks who fish for these species and folks who don't fish for these species, not having, not knowing where to get information from or where these fish are stocked or how to fish for them was a barrier as well. And so we want to improve how we're distributing that information. And we also found that most of the folks who are fishing for these species in reservoirs are a very narrow demographic range. And so, we're providing this resource across the entire state, and we would like to see the commission target more diverse anglers to get more people utilizing these resources. And then lastly, with, the population growth, and in some reservoirs, it's not very easy to collect biological data. We felt like it would be very beneficial to advance our use of technologies to collect passive angler-driven data. And then lastly, there was a lot of research that we wanted to put in the plan, but we tried really hard to focus on what we felt would allow us to make better decisions. And so the first research that we would like to do is to evaluate the success of Bodie bass crosses. So currently, or we're kind of in the process of switching over, but currently we use female striped bass crossed with male white bass. But you can also do female white bass crossed with male striped bass. So, and there's advantages to both. But what we don't know is whether they perform the same. So that's on the list. We'd like to experiment with stocking rates across the state to make sure that we're stocking the most efficient way that we can. We would like to study catch and release mortality. So we're doing catch and release on the coast, but there's not a lot of information on how catch and release impacts Bodie bass and striped bass in reservoirs. And this impacts, our decisions when we are trying to figure out how many fish to stock or what the regulation should be. And then in order to better compare our data across time and water bodies, we would like to figure out a way to standardize our sampling techniques. And then we do have one seasonal regulation, and this is something that other states have played around with. And so we would like to evaluate how that seasonal regulation has been received, and also if it has actually had an impact on that population and whether it has any use in the future of the program. And then lastly, I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about Alabama bass and other invasive species, but because they're so new in reservoirs in North Carolina, we don't really know how they interact with striped bass and Bodie bass. And so if we're going to be stocking fish into a reservoir that has Alabama bass, and those Alabama bass, are not setting the striped bass up for success, we want to know that prior to stocking. So those are all of our research ideas. So the next steps for the plan are for you guys to review it. Then we will incorporate your comments, and hopefully it will be adopted in October. And then we will do our best to distribute this information and, to as many people as possible. And, we're really proud of this plan. We feel like we worked really hard on it in the last few years, and we feel like it's a really valuable resource for our biologists, and we had our biologists in mind. We wanted to create something that supports their decisions, but also provides information for the public and step-by-step, ways to improve and continue the success of the program. So with that, I'll just acknowledge some other folks that worked on the plan, some of whom are in this room. Catherine Jewell, Christina Watkins were the social scientists that developed the survey. And then our hatchery personnel, like I said, are the backbone of our program. Jeff Evans, Landon Beaver, Barry Midget, Josh Cooper, and then the supervisors who really, helped guide the formation of the plan and did a lot of editing. So Lawrence Dorsey, Doug Wessler, and Ben Ricks. So I'll take any questions. Yeah.
So we're put and take. How long are your fish living versus Ben's living in the river?
Yeah, well, so striped bass, they're not meant to live in reservoirs, but they can. So they really only live to be about 4 years, 4 or 5 in reservoirs. Some that have cooler water temperatures, they can live a little longer, maybe it's like 7. But that warm, shallow bath water essentially is what we have, and it speeds up their metabolism, so they just don't live as long.
Picture shown like that right there and the one before that.
So that was probably a coastal. These ones are from a reservoir. The Bodie bass get pretty big, but yeah, most of the pictures are,
Left hand. That's a 4-year-old fish, I think.
that is probably 2 or 3. Probably 2. That was Oak Hollow Reservoir. So we stock fingerlings.
Fish has grown pretty darn good in 4 years.
Yep, at Hyco Lake, we're seeing them grow to be like 18 inches by 1.5. So they grow really fast, especially in Hyco. Yeah. They have really fast growth, which is why they're so popular. And so they don't need to grow as long and they don't need to reproduce. So we're not as concerned about their length, but when they are able to grow longer, they're able to grow bigger. So in the mountains is where you would like Lake Hiawassee is what we would consider a trophy fishery because we don't stock as many, but they're able to grow a lot bigger out there and live longer. Yeah, very.
So since you mentioned Hyco, it's where we are, and we just had a devastating flood, 7.5 feet above normal water level.
Yep.
I guess common sense tells you that we've lost a lot of fish. I would assume. Is that not correct?
We won't know until we've done a assessment in probably, so these fish don't typically recruit to the gill nets until they're 1 or 2. So if we go out there this winter, per se, we might not be able to tell that the fish that were stocked this summer are gone yet. So we won't know that until next year, but my guess is that they went swimming.
Stocking, because of potential, if it's proven that we've lost a lot of fish, will we do like 62,000 a year now.
Yeah.
Go up to 85,000.
Yeah. So that's part of our adaptive management strategies. We will take that into account when the biologist will take that into account when he makes his recommendation next year. And I can personally say that that will most likely be a recommendation.
I'd love to talk about it later, but so what are the bigger fish? I've only heard 15 inches is come out of there.
In Hyco?
But if you're saying this guy came out, he's 23 inch. That's a big difference. Are they that big coming out of there?
I'm sorry, out of Hyco Lake?
Oh, Hyco.
Yeah. I can't say offhand what the range of sizes was. I don't remember, but the one year I went out, it was the first year that we could catch them. So I was only seeing like the 2s and the 3-year-olds. But my guess is now they're probably 20+ inches.
Need to get some better friends to know how to fish a little better. Take John Stone.
Actually, what I talk Corey and going up there, what we're doing wrong here. But you know, there's a lot of good fishermen out there, and I talk about any really super, 15-pound fish or 12. But
Other questions?
Corey, were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say they're growing about 18 inches in a year and a half at Hyco, so there are 18-inch fish.
in the aftermath, yeah,
So
we're
they're
all
at least growing
fish went.
18. If they live to about 4, they're gonna get to about 22, 23 inches before they die. Yeah,
Wow.
they just don't live very long.
They're not gonna be 15 pounds either. These species don't get that big. The Bodie bass, the striped bass,
Okay.
potentially. Yeah. Happy to answer any other questions too, if you have more after this.
It's too far off, but I'm struggling with. How do they die? Oh, I mean, they're growing faster than our fish are growing in the river. But they're dying at 4 years old. I mean, like, it seems like they're really healthy and then they're just done. That's the best they can get out of them in 4 years.
It speeds up their metabolism. They're not dying at 4 in the mountain region, but in the Piedmont, their metabolism is, so it's like speeding up your life, basically. So like something that may live to be 8 years is now only going to live 4 because their metabolism is so sped up.
They live hard.
Particularly in hot water, they really like their metabolism's like on fire. They're having to eat all the time, but they're losing weight at the same time because their metabolism is so fast. So it just causes them to live a very short life. Part of the is with Bodie bass is their genetics. They are a cross with white bass, and white bass don't live long anyway. Just naturally, they only live to be about 4 or 5 years old and they're off the landscape. So Bodie bass in particular, if you look at them across the southeast, they don't live past age. Striped bass probably live a little bit longer in our reservoirs, but Bodie bass.
So the Bodie bass that we're stocking, are they the striped eggs or is it the white bass eggs?
So all Bodie bass are a cross between striped bass and white bass. But where the nuance is whether you use female striped bass versus male white bass.
Yeah, my question is, what are we doing right now?
So we're doing both right now because we're transitioning into utilizing female white bass because they're a lot easier to find. So as you heard with the striped bass talk, the populations are, dwindling. We're not able to get these big fish that we previously were able to use for brood fish. And so now we are using female white bass and we're also playing around with domesticated brood stock to make that easier.
So one gets bigger than the other, right?
Yeah, so I think that's historically why they used female striped bass and then male white bass, which is why this, top on our list is to evaluate how they perform. So a lot of other states have switched over to using female white bass and they haven't seen a difference in growth potential or longevity or, weight, anything like that. But we haven't really done it yet in our reservoirs. So only in the last few years have we begun to make that switch.
I just have one question. So the walleyes right up in the mountain reservoirs. And we don't seem to have a solution to that. And as you know, walleye fishermen are fanatical meat fishermen, right? Has there been any thought about trying to stock Bodie bass in those reservoirs like Fontana? So we're taking.
I'm going to defer to the mountain region supervisor, Doug.
Good morning. I'm Doug Besler, the Mountain Region Fishery Supervisor. So we were seeing significant impacts to walleye fisheries across the mountain region. Since we've been stocking walleye, particularly as we're going to a higher rate, we are seeing those fish come into the fisheries. For instance, Lake James, we're seeing historic catch rates now. Fontana, as we're increasing our stocking rates, we're seeing walleye recover and return to angler creel. So we're seeing even like guide trips now showing up where there's enough fish in these systems where we're seeing outfitters target them. So we think from the walleye perspective, it's really just a matter of producing enough fish to recreate the historic fisheries. So if we're unable to do that, then you look at other options, whether it be striped bass or hybrid striped bass.
So I think the committee would be interested in seeing a study on that, on the improvement with walleye, because that's something I get a lot of questions about from members. So maybe that could be something for a future committee meeting, I guess. Sure. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
So Corey Oakley is going to talk about the flounder harvest season. Chris, oh, we got another one here. Christopher Smith, Northeast largemouth bass.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, commissioners, for having me today. My name is Christopher Smith. I'm the District 1 fisheries biologist. I've been in District 1 with the commission for almost 10 years, over 10 years now. I'm excited to talk about something other than striped bass. I've been up here talking about striped bass before. We have a lot of great fisheries in District 1, so I'm really excited to highlight something different. This isn't a very data-heavy presentation. There's a lot of pictures, which I figured you guys would and gals would enjoy. If you haven't been to District 1, there's a lot of water in District 1. We have 13 tributary rivers and creeks that flow into the Albemarle Sound. You can see the figure here. We have 2 lakes. My talk today is going to really be focusing on our river systems. Most of the river systems in District 1 are very low flow, except the Roanoke River, which is controlled by the hydroelectric dams in District 3. These systems are wind driven. There's very small lunar tides on these rivers. They're less than about 6 inches of lunar tide. So it's really hard to main it or to discern what's a lunar tide. What's really unique is the expansive habitat, and this is kind of a list of what roughly, what the percentages are. Cypress knees and cypress stumps, cypress trees are probably the majority of our habitat. We have laydowns, so these cypress trees are falling over, docks and bulkheads, and then we have some aquatic vegetation. So coastal largemouth bass are really controlled. Their populations are really controlled by two environmental factors, dissolved oxygen and salinity. So a couple of terms related to dissolved oxygen. Hypoxia is when our oxygen levels in the water are less than 3 milligrams per liter. Anoxia is when there's no oxygen in the water. Ideal for fish is roughly about 4. It varies species to species. That's just kind of a general range. Coastal rivers usually stay on average around 3 milligrams per liter. Anything below that, we start seeing stress in our fish. We see localized hypoxia and anoxia. Late spring through early fall, we have some water quality monitoring stations that we put out in the springtime, and we start seeing these tributary creeks become anoxic or hypoxic early to mid-April. We also have salinity that impacts our largemouth bass as well. 3.2 parts per thousand, which is about 10% seawater. We start seeing egg and fry mortality. 9 parts per thousand, we'll start seeing adult mortality. We see significant salinity increases during dry years. We've had really dry years the past about 3 years. And especially when flows coming out of the Roanoke are very low. The Roanoke River produces about 60% of the fresh water that flows into the Albemarle Sound. So flow out of the Roanoke really drives the sound salinity. We also see high salinities in the summer times when we have the southern wind patterns, southern and easterly wind patterns that push salt water from Oregon Inlet up through Alligator River too, and then into the Sound, into the lower rivers. So what we do in District 1 for largemouth bass, we have 2 largemouth bass surveys. In the fall, we sample the Roanoke Kashai complex, as well as the Chowan and Meherrin complex. We rotate those every year. So one year we'll do Roanoke, next year we'll do the Chowan. And then, excuse me, we try to squeeze in all the other tributaries on a rotational basis in the spring. We're all over the place chasing shad and herring and striped bass in the spring. So we try to squeeze in 1 or 2 of our other tributaries during the springtime. And this is kind of what we see. This is probably about the extent of our data. So this spring, we were on the Perquimans River. If you look at 2011, which is about 8 years post Hurricane Isabel, on the Perquimans River, we caught 94 fish. It's a decent catch rate of 33 fish an hour. Actually, that's a pretty good catch rate for coastal rivers. But you can see here, we only had 2 fish that were greater than 5 pounds. You can see on these figures here, it's the length and the percentage of catch. We weren't really seeing a whole lot of fish above 16 inches. Moving forward to 2025, 14 years post Hurricane Irene, we had a catch rate of 50 fish an hour electrofishing, which is great. Caught 152 fish, and you can see our size range shifted. We are starting to see a lot of fish in that 16 to 24 inch range. We had 9 fish greater than 5 pounds, and including 1 fish that you'll see here in a minute that was almost 10 and a half pounds. So we're not just seeing this in the Perquimans River. The past 5 or 6 years, we've been seeing this in all of our tributary rivers. These are some of our pictures from our springtime and fall electrofishing surveys. That upper right-hand corner is the 10-pound I think it was 10 pound, 3 ounces. The one below that, in about 200-yard stretch of lily pads, we caught a 6.5, a 5 3/8, and like that 10 and a 3 or 10.3 pound fish. So we're seeing this in the Chowan, the Roanoke, Perquimans, Pasquotank, pretty much all of our river systems. We're seeing these big fish and these expanded length distributions. It's not just the commission, our research and surveys that are seeing this. Our local and regional anglers are seeing this too. In District 1, we have over 27. I really lost count at 27, but clubs and trails that use our waters, that fish our waters on a regular basis. Some of the major ones include the Cat Tidewater, Cat East, Bojangles, and Fishers of Men tournament trails. Those are the regional ones that are pretty big. And at these tournaments, we're seeing winning weights, one day, 2 day bags of 20 to 25 pounds. The upper right-hand corner was out of the Pasquotank River late March. And the winning anglers here had a little over 25 pounds. They weighed in an 8-pound bass, which wasn't even the big fish for that tournament. I think it was a 9.2 that won big fish for that tournament. And then the bottom one, once again, this was from last month at the Chowan River. So we're seeing these bigger fish in our system. Just some more of our local anglers catching these big fish on tournaments. It's not just tournaments. I talked to the Saturday, Sunday fishermen, the recreational fishermen, if you will, on a regular basis, and at the boat ramps or on the phone, and they're seeing these big fish too. So word got out to Major League Fishing about how great the fishing is in District 1. So they made an appearance June 4th through 8th of last summer, 2024. They fished the Chowan and Roanoke rivers out of Edenton. We had approximately 80 anglers from all over the world. Over 1,300 fish were caught, which resulted in like 3,100 and some change pounds. Looking at fish greater than 5 pounds, there was 50 fish over a 4-day tournament that were caught that were over 5 pounds. Just some photos here of those pro anglers, courtesy of Major League Fishing. So that tournament was a success. Moving forward to this year, Bassmaster Elite Series got wind of our great fishery in District 1, and they fished out of Elizabeth City April 10th through the 13th of this spring. They fished the Pasquotank and surrounding rivers when they can get to it. It was pretty windy. They had a lot of beaten up boats in gear trying to traverse the sound. 102 anglers. There were 68 fish weighed in that were 5 pounds or greater. You can see here on the right-hand side, Trey McKinney, he came before the closing or the off-limits date, and he caught 32 pounds and 4 fish by noon on the Chowan River. Looking at the winner, you can see the gentleman there, Kyle Walcher, 20 fish for 118 pounds over 4 days. He had three of the 4 days, he had 30+ pound bags, a big fish at 10.8 pounds, and what I heard was a record-setting margin of victory of 45 pounds. So he probably could have not fished that last day and still won by a good margin. So, they had a great time. I heard a lot of great things. They announced, Bassmasters announced that they will be coming back in 2026. This was just through the local paper, but they just released their schedule Monday, and they will be back June 11th through the 13th, fishing out of Elizabeth City on the Pasquotank and Albemarle Sound and the tributaries. They also put out a list of best southeastern places to fish. Number 4 was the Albemarle Sound and connected rivers in North Carolina. If you note, it's also ahead of Jordan Lake and some of the other North Carolina reservoirs. So why is the bass fishing so great in District 1 and along the coast? You know, District 1's not the only district seeing this. We're seeing great fish in District 2 as well. So we haven't had major impacts from hurricanes. I think the last major hurricane that had impacts on our fisheries was 2011, and that was Hurricane Irene. The biggest impacts come from fish kills. These fish kills are caused by dissolved oxygen crashes, like I mentioned before, hypoxic and anoxic conditions, and rapid salinity change. Mentioned the last major fish kill was 2011 and Hurricane Irene, and these are some photos from that. This is only a small picture or a small portion of what our biologists at the time saw. The whole rivers, all of the rivers were pretty much what you see on the bottom there. Interesting enough, you know, stocking has minimal impact on the recovery of our coastal fishery, bass fisheries. We start to see natural recovery begin about 4 years after the fish kill. And our regulations on the coast, while, you know, largemouth bass and black bass are predominantly catch and release fisheries, our regulations, our minimum length limit of 14 inches and our daily creel limit of 5 fish a day really help protect these recovering populations. So with that, we'll take questions. Yes, sir.
The Curry Tuck, I've caught a few largemouth bass.
It's hard for us to shock the sound proper. It's just been so salty. We can't officially effectively shock there. We'll go up to Northwest River, Tulls Creek, that way, and I mean we've seen similar results there. I mean it's from the Virginia line all the way down to Hyde County. We're seeing these what you saw on these photos here.
It's good news. Thank you.
Great. Other questions? Any Florida genetics in those bass that you're seeing, those big bass?
Yes, sir. So we've been doing, thanks to Scott, heading up, and then now Kelsey, we've done a lot of genetics work, not only in District 1, but throughout the state. We've taken genetic samples from just about every water body in District 1, minus the mill ponds. And they're mutts. They're a mix of Florida and northern genetics. The majority of these alleles or the genetics of these fish are Florida. Pasquotank River is, you know, 95 to 98% Florida bass. And as you go up the Roanoke and up the Chowan, you know, that number falls, but it's still majority Florida bass genetics.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Now it's for you. Talking about flounder harvest season.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, first off, thanks to my staff. As you can tell, they're doing a lot of great work across the state, so I really appreciate all their efforts today. Just briefly about flounder, if you didn't see the press release that we released with the Division of Marine Fisheries, we will have a flounder season September 1st through the 14th. The daily limit will be 1 fish per day, and the minimum size limit will be 15 inches. So we tasked staff, I mentioned this in the last meeting, we tasked staff to look at the landings datas and that kind of stuff, and go back and look at, you know, what the poundage quota would be for recreational for the year. And our staff suggested a 2-week season. We had director's office talk to Division of Marine Fisheries, and they agreed. And so all the seasons across the board, inland, joint, and coastal, will be at the same time. It'll all be at those dates that I mentioned. And I just wanted to update you with that. So any questions about flounder, which is my favorite flatfish to talk about?
I just think it's really great. We're not gonna have another hoedown back.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Chairman. Yeah, I'm glad for that.
Any other questions? Our trout, mountain trout management plan, isn't that up for revision?
We have started that process. We're not nearly there yet, but we have started that process. We've started two plans. So the plan that Kelsey talked about today, we will get out to the committee members for review and get your comments on that. Hopefully, if we can incorporate your comments, we will try to bring that back to the commission for adoption in October. But we've also started revisions on the mountain trout plan, and we've also started a black bass management plan as well. So those are kind of in the baby stages, but we will bring them back to the committee when we get closer to time.
I'll make sure I understand. You said the mountain trout plan you'd be looking at in October.
No. The Marone plan that Kelsey, we'll bring that back for adoption. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you.
When do you think you'd be bringing?
I don't know. We're still pretty early. I mean, we can talk about that if you have a timetable that you'd like to see it, but
I'll talk to you.
yeah, it's still pretty early.
Any other issues that need to come before the committee? Saying none, we are adjourned.
If you would, let's take a 10-minute break. Call your meeting to order at 10.
The Habitat Non-Endangered Species to order. Welcome, everybody. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. Recorded meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.gov. I'd like to call on Ms. Martha Winkler for a roll call.
I think you're gonna do a roll call for endangered species committee members. Committee Vice Chair Lane Zimmer.
Here.
Committee Member Tommy Bonville. Committee Member Brad Standback. Committee Member Hayden Rogers.
Here.
Committee Member John Alexander. Ex officio members Bonnie Crump
Here.
and Mark Craig.
Here.
Mr. Vice Chairman, you have a forum.
Thank you, Winkler. I'd like to call on Dr. Sarah Schweitzer to present.
Thank you very much, Vice Chairman Zimmer, and good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm going to present on one of our listed conservation plans, the Eastern Black Rail Plan. As we all know, these are required under 113.333 for each of the species on our list. And during our last Hinges meeting, Casey Cook, one of our water bird biologists, gave a nice overview of the work that's currently going on for the black rail. And we also went into some detail of the different types of work that we're going to do within the conservation plan. This plan has been reviewed internally, and it's been reviewed with our Non-Game Wildlife Advisory Committee. You all in this committee reviewed it. And so after our last meeting, we were able to release it for a 30-day public review. And during that 30-day review, we received 25 responses, 13 were in support, 12 provided no comment, but there were written comments from 9 people. And also we received a nice letter in support from the Audubon, North Carolina. What we're requesting today is to move this forward for a vote tomorrow. It's Exhibit L. For the commission meeting tomorrow. And let's see.
Do you give a motion to approve? Or excuse me, a motion? Yes.
So moved.
Okay.
Any discussion?
Second meeting member.
That wasn't.
Hey, that's right. So my, sorry, Commissioner Rogers, should I hear any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All present. It's approved unanimously by the forum. We'd like to next, so thank you, Dr. Schweitzer. We'd like to call on Shannon Deaton to introduce the next speaker.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to have this presentation about our Western North Carolina Barrier Initiative. Several of you have heard us talk about funding that we received from state legislature a couple of years ago. And that funding expired June 30th. So I have asked Van Stansel to come and give us an overview of how we were able to implement those funds across the state. He is our multi-county special projects coordinator. He's kind of the catch-all. If we have a lot of projects that are in multiple regions and districts across the state. And some of those are pipeline projects or hydropower projects, or just multi-regional that really need a person that can coordinate with multiple people within our agency and our biologists. So I want to welcome Van up here and give him a chance to go over these projects that we were able to put on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon, and good morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk about our recent work to remove dams in the western part of the state. Start off with talking about, why we're concerned about dams and why there might be, a reason to look to remove ones that are no longer functioning. Dams and barriers in general, they change lotic or flowing habitats into lentic or still water or lake habitats. They block upstream access for migratory species. They can fragment populations of riverine species. They also affect sediment and wood transport. They can alter stream flows. They can also change water quality. We also need to keep in mind that the dams don't last forever. Many dams are no longer needed, may not be as safe as they once were, or functioning or as they were originally intended or economically viable. They have a limited lifespan. Over time, impoundments will fill with sediment, construction materials may degrade, and some have been damaged by our recent hurricanes. To maintain a dam continues to cost money, and sometimes the cost to maintain or repair those dams exceeds the cost to actually remove it. Here's a photo from the Lockville Dam on the Deep River near US 1, and it was breached a couple of years ago. In 2021, the NC legislature appropriated $7.2 million to our agency for dam removals in the western part of the state. We had 3 years to spend this, as Shannon mentioned, and this ended last month. When we were given the $7.2 million, we had to figure out how we were going to go about this. This was kind of new to us. How would we have contracts with engineering firms for designs, or how would we go about selecting them and funding the removal? So we worked with partners, American Rivers and Mountain True, that have worked on dam removals in the past and know the resources and communities in the western part of the state. We also utilize the National Barrier Inventory and Prioritization tool that was developed by SARP, Southeast Aquatic Resource Partnership. This started in the Southeast, but is now expanded nationwide. Currently, there's over 28,000 dams in the database for North Carolina. Now, most of these are smaller, most of the major farm ponds, but there are 420 dams that are on streams that are third order or larger. The database allows one to filter dams by size, by county, by how many SGCN species are in the watershed. We also can look at how many miles of stream might be restored if we remove that dam, both upstream and downstream. When we were looking at prioritizing dams for removal, we want to focus on priority species, priority aquatic communities, and also look at how many miles could be gained by removing those dams. We also had to think about some practical considerations. We have to have a willing landowner for a landowner access agreement, have to have good access. How much is it going to cost? How long will it take? And is there support from the community and from partners? We eventually landed on 8 different projects that we wanted to fund. For some of these, we just provided funding for design, permitting, and construction oversight. So if we get an engineered design for this dam, it could be removed later on. For 3 of these, we gave funding toward full delivery, which included removal. And for 2, Craggy and Cullowhee at the bottom, we just funded a feasibility assessment, which would be the first step toward potentially removing these dams in the future. So far, we removed 2 of these, Shells Mill a year ago, and then Cranberry Dam, which was this past May. So I'll go through and highlight some of these in a little more detail. Elah Dam is located on the Coonamessett River. It was built in 1925 as a hydroelectric dam, and it's at the southern edge of the Qualla boundary for the eastern band of Cherokee Indians. There's sickle fin red horse and Appalachian elk toe in the Coonamessett downstream of the dam. And this has been a functioning FERC hydro plant up until very recently. In March, FERC issued a license surrender for this project. And as a result, it was transferred from Northbrook Carolina Hydro to Mainstream Conservation Trust. Shoals Mill Dam has been abandoned or breached for decades, and it was removed last July by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Aquatic Habitat Restoration Team. There's good habitat for hellbenders there. We collected 9 of those in the vicinity of the dam, moved those downstream, and they were also supporting funding for additional hellbender monitoring going forward. Here's a couple of photos showing before and after. So the top photos are looking upstream at the dam before and after, and then the bottom 2 are looking downstream before and after. There was some damage from Hurricane Helene here, and we had some funds available to do some more restoration work there to shore up the banks. So we used that to do some more stream stabilization after Helene. Old Fort Finishing Dam is located on the Catawba River near the town of Old Fort. It's an abandoned industrial intake, and there's brook floater and sea green daughters there. Because it's near I-40, we have some access challenges to that. How do you get there? But the design firm, engineering firm has figured that out, and we've got a plan going forward to remove this one. Cranberry Creek Dam, located near the Blue Ridge Parkway up in Nash County, is a small earthen dam, and it was removed in May of this year. We were concerned there with thermal impacts to brook trout, which are located downstream. As I mentioned previously, we also funded feasibility analyses for 2 dams. This was one of the first steps toward potentially removing these dams. Craggy Dam is one of 3 located on the main stem of the French Broad River, downstream of Asheville. It's an active FERC exempt hydro. It's run by the county, so they get some money by generating power there. So we had to look at the cost benefits of removing that dam. How would they make up for that lost revenue? How would that change the river? So we funded a analysis for that one. And then for the Cullowhee Dam on the Tuckasegee River, there's 2 water intakes located upstream of the impoundment that's created by the dam. So if that dam is removed, they would have to modify their intake and also modify the way that they treat their water. So what would that cost be? These dams may come out, they may not, we'll see, but this is definitely a first step toward potentially removing them.
Do you have the financial analysis on the FERC exempt dam on the back of one page? Do you have that analysis under still?
There is a report that's been generated for that. That's Buncombe County. The Buncombe County Municipal Sewerage District owns Craigie Dam. So we got. Sir? Not off the top of my head, but we looked at, what it would take from a solar field standpoint to offset that. And that's part of the alternatives analysis, but they don't really want to own the solar field. They just want to, kind of separate that. So pretty much, yeah. Yeah, so they went through and came up with their numbers that they had for how much it costs to keep it up every year. And so we'll see. It's up to their board to a large extent what they want to do. I think there's local support for removing it. There's also movement to remove another one downstream there, Capitola Dam.
What kind of dam safety act for monitoring regulation?
Right. So we're also trying to do some monitoring of these dam removals to try to inform future projects, looking at the aquatic community before and after we remove them. And there's additional monitoring by Appalachian State of the hellbenders on the Watauga River. We also use agency funds to support Kit Wheeler, a professor at Tennessee Tech, who's going to look at what he calls the salmon in the southeast suckers and how their nutrient concentrations vary and how by them moving above a site where a dam was, they contribute nutrients to the ecosystem. And this will help kind of inform future restoration efforts. With the designs for Old Fort Finishing Dam and Burningtown Lakes Dam in place, we were able to successfully get a $2 million grant from NIFWIF, the America, it was the America Beautiful Challenge. Now it's called America's Ecosystem Restoration Initiative. So this was funding to remove those two dams, as well as conduct over 600 culvert assessments in the Little Tennessee Basin. And because these were shovel-ready projects, we were successful in getting that grant. I want to acknowledge lots of folks that have contributed to this work. Folks from the Habitat Conservation Division, Chris Wood, formerly in our HabCon division, who was instrumental leading the effort to get the $2 million NIFWIF grant. Our folks from American Rivers and Mountain Tree that we work closely with. We also, once we allocated all the money to these projects, we had about $100,000 left over. So we were able to look at some other options to spend all that 7.2 million. And we worked with Julie DeMeester and Lucy Law from the Nature Conservancy to give some money toward removal of a rough fish barrier on the North Fork Mills River. Also appreciate the efforts from folks from SARP, as well as including Chris Goudreau, formerly with WRC. And I mentioned the Elah Dam. We procured money to pay for the original design for removing that dam, as well as $4 million toward the actual removal, because it's a big functioning hydroelectric plant. Takes millions of dollars to actually do the removal. So that was a large part of our contributions, our 7.2. And all these entities, these agencies and organizations were part of the Elah Dam Coalition that came together to restore the Longman, the Oconaluftee River. A few takeaways so far: dam removals are not quick. It takes some time. If you have good partners, that helps a lot. Having shovel-ready projects with a design already in place helps you out with getting additional funding for removal. You know, each project's a little bit different, but the more we do, we learn each time. And with that, if there's time, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Questions? Just a brief comment. So for some of the new commissioners and some of the ones that may have been on here a couple of years, you remember several years ago, the Wildlife Commission asked our staff to create this bank of dams and prioritize it, because there's private entities that do it for enhancement credits, DOT. So and I want to say thanks to Shannon, Chris. I mean, it took several years to put this list together. They did a phenomenal job. I think it was about 2 years or 2.5 years it took to create this prioritized list that now we can use. And like you said, you can go, and I think we got 6,000 or 7,000 maybe dams. Is that about right in the state, or maybe more than that? That are old hydro projects, old textile mills, and real benefit of it. I've been a cheerleader from day one, I admit it. One of my pet projects. And the reason for it is you go buy a game land and you've got stewardship costs, you have to build roads, you have to post it, you have to maintain it, you do parking lots. But you go out and you remove the dam and you restore that stream, you got recreation, aquatic habitat benefit, riparian benefits, and there's no future. It's low hanging fruit. And so that's why, to see what Shannon, Chris, all of them did a fantastic job putting this list together. And we're seeing the fruits and benefits of it today, in continuation of the work that Chris did and you all did. And, my hats off to all of you, because it's over the long term, it'll pay big dividends.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you, Mr. Stinson. Thank you. I would like to call on Shannon Beatty to present the 2025 North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan provision.
Good morning. I put Van on a pretty strict timeline and told him to limit his presentation to the actual locations. But I want to say that we didn't really spend a lot of time saying how much effort was put into this. And many of the people in the room from staff really helped us get to this point. So before I go to the Wildlife Action Plan, it was a huge hurdle for the agency for these non-traditional funds. We'd never done it before. And we set some really big ground. So I'm not really trying to put a punch out there, but we know what the path looks like now. It's doable and repeatable. And that's why we sought those additional funds. So we're capable of doing it. We did a great job of implementing this prioritization tool that Commissioner Crump charged us to come up with, and it was great to see it implemented. So there is one note, because I'll forget at the end, and I'm not gonna hold it. There are 2024 wildlife diversity annual reports on the table. I don't know where they are, but each of you should have them. All right, yeah, great. And on that same note, each of you should have a handout that is some FAQs for the 2025 Wildlife Action Plan. If you have the opportunity to share or answer questions about the revised or draft Wildlife Action Plan, please reference that or give us a call. So you've heard from me before. I'm Shannon Deaton with the Habitat Conservation Division, and we've almost finished our marathon of revising the Wildlife Action Plan that has to be revised every 10 years. It started in 2021. I know we didn't really talk about it that far back, but the efforts start a couple of years in advance. We're nearing the September deadline, and this is, I think I released it last time because we got it that day, the new Wildlife Action Plan 2025 cover. And it showcases, we wanted to make sure we showcase species statewide, all the diversity of regions that we have. So the State and Tribal Wildlife Grant requires every state to have a state wildlife action plan. That grant provides federal matching grants that don't replace but supplement existing fish and wildlife funding resources. And to be eligible for those funds, we're required to have this plan and revise it every 10 years. It's intended to identify conservation needs and outline steps to conserve wildlife and habitat before they become rare and more costly to protect. It's a foundation for state and federal agency and a wide array of conservation partners and the public to think strategically about their individual roles and how we can coordinate on conservation efforts. So every wildlife action plan is required to have 8 elements, including species, habitats, threats, conservation actions, a review procedure, coordination with other state, federal, and local agencies and Indian tribes in the development of the plan, and some sort of public participation. So the 2025 revision followed the same format as 2015, and that was a best management practice that was recommended from the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. So this is a comparison of the 2015 to the 2025. Just want to acknowledge that the number of species of greatest conservation need actually reduced, and that's just a reflection of how we're learning in our knowledge gaps in research and our conservation actions. That just shows that we're getting a little bit smarter about species. We're cataloging additional information, and it's just helping us in how we're prioritizing. One of the changes between the two plans is that invertebrates category actually in 2015 included aquatic snails, mussels, and crayfish. But for 2025, we did have the opportunity to add land snails, which were not reflected in our action plan before. So just a general overview of what was revised since for this third revision. We do have all the same chapters. It's 8 chapters, each with a set of appendices. We updated the species of greatest conservation need list, which I mentioned, but also the tables. So we got a lot of feedback that people like these downloadable Excel tables so that they can prioritize and sort on their own. And then we moved all the references to the back of the document because we felt like a lot of people were finding that a challenge. We were duplicating a lot of references. It's just better use of the pages. And then based on feedback, we decided it was time to showcase some of our projects that were implementing the plan. And so we added 5 new conservation success stories per recommendation from staff. Those included wood stork downlisting, Carolina northern flying squirrel, magnificent ram's horn, the Conservation Aquatic Center at Marion and Roanoke Log Perch. And then we added 5 new habitat descriptions, and we had some updates in collaboration with the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy. One of those I'm going to highlight, which is our Conservation Opportunity Tool. So previously in 2015, we had that tool was hosted by NC State, and the programs that we were using were outdated. There were some IT concerns, and so we transitioned over to collaborate with the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy team. They're doing similar efforts with South Carolina and Georgia. It incorporates the conservation blueprint that they use. Again, what we heard from partners is we really like to see visual. We want shape files. We want it to be downloadable, interactive. This allows us to do that. The additional thing that's happened since 2015 is we're doing a lot of region-wide projects. Most of the grant funding sources are really pushing us to do landscape scale, not looking at state lines, that they want to know range-wide how a species is doing. And so this tool allows us to look across the landscape where our layers are kind of line up with South Carolina and Georgia as well. So this uses intact habitat cores, 100+ acres, and the tiers are based on the number of species of greatest conservation need populations within each core. It was peer reviewed with our staff and externally, and it also aligns with these other state efforts. So the difference is that the NC State tool was using USGS GAP data, and this tool actually uses natural heritage element occurrence data, Esri land cover data, and like I said, the conservation blueprint. So lastly, last time I met with you guys, I indicated we were open in a 30-day public review, and people were able to post online comments on the online forum or send us emails. We circulated this notice to 259 media outlets, 240 partner organizations and individuals that are identified as Wildlife Action Plan partners, and also circulated through our agency e-newsletter. We got 16 general comments and then 12 detailed comments, and all of these will be included in Appendix 8 of the Wildlife Action Plan as a reference. So we did ask specific questions within the online form. Do you support the changes? So 75%, which was 12 responses, said yes. We had a no with no extra detail, and then 3 that didn't indicate a preference at all. So before I go into the comments that we receive, I'd just like to mention what generally the purpose of the Wildlife Action Plan is. It's a conservation blueprint to help others statewide make conservation decisions. So the tool, the Wildlife Action Plan is not meant to tell people what they should work on or set priorities for them. Gives them the ability to have the resource of what the status of a species is, a habitat, so that they can make that decision for themselves. They're the expert in certain areas. They live in certain parts of the state, so they can do searches within the Wildlife Action Plan and make those decisions based on the information in the plan. So one of the questions is any information missing from the plan that you thought should be there? Accessibility to natural areas, especially for youth, more explicit discussion of the difference between the last plan, inclusion of the ongoing threat of acid deposition and acidification, and less vague in some parts. For example, when it proposes plans to help a species that is in decline, they would like something more than restore the habitat. And then the next question is, are there specific sections of the plan where you would appreciate more detail? Conservation efforts performed before the 2015 Wildlife Action, or since the 2015, which was our spotlights that we did include, and encouragement for the implementation of low impact, low cost stream restoration, add soil and stream acidification to the threat section, why commercial exploitation is permitted for any turtle species except for snapping turtle, and efforts to partner with DOT to mitigate highway impacts, an estimated number of fish impacted and killed by dredging. Those are very specific, but and then these are some of the comments that we got that actually came with an accompanying letter. Would you like to share comments about the plan? So we did get a letter from Southern Environmental Law Center and Defenders of Wildlife commending our efforts for ongoing stewardship and dedication. And then the North Carolina Conservation Network, they attached a petition with 401 signatures in support. And they said they were grateful for the years of scientific research that it took for drafting the plan and the months of work that went into it. And then lastly, from Pew Charitable Trust, they said it provides a blueprint to proactively conserve North Carolina's vast array of flora and fauna. It's nice to see compliments like that in such a large plan. So the point of today is that we're kind of getting to the end. Like I said, the plan is due to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service by September 30th. And in order for us to do that, we would need support from the commission on the draft plan. So the Habitat Non-Game Endangered Species Committee has had an opportunity to review, as well as the rest of the commission. And staff is recommending a resolution to express support, if so voted on. And then we would get to the point, but before we submit the draft to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we would request letters of support from partners. In 2015, we got letters of support from American Fisheries Society and the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. We could do that as well, or some of the letters that we already received. Honestly, based on Cindy's review of those, could really serve as a support letter as well. We would just ask them how they feel about that. And then after it's approved, we're thinking it would be early 2026 before we would hear back from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We would do all the things to circulate the final plan, including the website, hard copies, CDs, making sure our GIS downloadable files are accurate and the searchable data set. So, but my last thing is I'm very happy that Cindy is here because this was a large lift, and she has really coordinated the entire agency in this second round for herself to revise the Wildlife Action Plan. And it was a pretty big hurdle. She's taken a lot of feedback and made sure that the plan got better this year and was more user-friendly based on partner feedback. And if you have questions, I'm probably direct them to her.
That's great. That's a culmination of all. Thank you, Ms. Dean. We'd like to call on Christian Waters to present.
Good morning, Commissioners. As Shannon mentioned, before we can submit this to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it would require endorsement or support from the Wildlife Resources Commission. To do that, we have typically done that through a resolution, and I would like to introduce and read to you the resolution that we will put forward tomorrow for your consideration as it relates to supporting and endorsing the plan. Resolution endorsing the North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan 2025 revision. Whereas the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission is the agency entrusted with the management and conservation of North Carolina's wildlife resources for the enjoyment of all people. Whereas state wildlife action plans are intended to help conserve and enhance the state's full array of fish and wildlife species and their habitats through the identification of species of greatest conservation need and other priority fish and wildlife. Whereas the North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan was first developed in 2005 with appropriations from the United States Congress for the State and Tribal Wildlife Grants Program. Whereas the North Carolina Wildlife North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan in conjunction with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission's strategic plan provides a blueprint to guide and direct conservation priorities of wildlife resources and habitats, emphasizing the use of best available science to keep common species common. And whereas the Congress has mandated that states' eligibility for receiving state and tribal wildlife grants to conserve wildlife resources and habitats is dependent upon maintaining an approved state wildlife action plan and subsequent revisions. And whereas the North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan has undergone comprehensive review and revision by the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission staff and commissioners in concert with the numerous federal, state, and local partners, as well as stakeholders. Now there be it resolved that the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission endorses the revised 2025 North Carolina Wildlife Action Plan as the blueprint to guide conservation of wildlife resources and habitats in North Carolina. This resolution was introduced by the Habitat Non-Game Endangered Species Committee and unanimously approved by acclamation by the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission in its duly assembled meeting on July 24th, 2025 in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Do I hear a motion to approve or to move it to committee tomorrow?
So moved.
Second.
These by somebody from the committee.
Oh.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Move that to tomorrow. Thank you, Christian. Want to thank all the committee members for being here, all the commissioners for sitting in as well. You know, I think we know that injuries, it may not be the first thing pops to mind when you're thinking of wildlife, but we all know its importance. And having served as vice chairman in the last two previous NG's chairman, I'd be remiss but did not acknowledge former chair Kelly Davis and her hard work and dedication to the NG's committee, as well as former NG's chair Mark Craig, and obviously staff who did all the heavy lifting. Vice Chairman Craig and more recently Kelly's diligence and commitment helped shepherd the Wildlife Action Plan and the Hinges Committee, again with staff's hard work and expertise. So on behalf of the people of North Carolina, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thanks to Kelly Davis for her commitment to the Wildlife Resource Commission and specifically to the Hinges Committee. If there's any other comments?
Well said.
Thank you. Well said. Seeing none, we'll adjourn.
Okay, we will, we got a 15-minute head start on lunch. Let's try to be back by 1:15. And we'll adjourn for lunch and hit the record or wherever you want to go. Most of it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna call this land acquisitions and property committee to order. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. The recording of the meeting will be available at www.newwildlife.org. I'm gonna call on Margo now to do a roll call.
Good afternoon. Going to do a roll call for our land acquisition and property committee members. Committee Chair Tom Berry.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Brad Stanback. Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Ray Clifton.
Here.
Landon Zimmer.
Here.
Ex officio members Monty Crump.
Here.
Mark Craig.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a floor.
Thank you, Margo. I'd like to call on our Land and Water Access Division Chief, Darren Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today I just bring to your attention, as you may recall, we closed on the Southport tract of the Green Swamp Game Land. And in doing so, this is that tract that's right beside the military facility down there. And we are going to propose to have that entire tract be archery only zone. So when we do that, when we make something an archery only zone, we have to have a public meeting. to declare that we're going to do that and have a public meeting for the public to be able to respond to that. So we have done that. We have had our public meeting down in Southport, the town of Southport. We had 5 attendees to our meeting, which was pretty good. They were all local folks, and the response to this request or to us proposing that we have this Southport track be archery only track was very positive. We didn't have anyone had a problem with it. Mostly they just had a lot of questions about that, about, you know, what that meant. What did it mean before it being commission property? And we answered all those questions, but a very positive response. So this season we'll have that track available as a archery only track for hunting. And I don't think that we have to take any action on this, Mr. Chairman. This is just report out that we did this.
This time.
And we're going to move forward with that. Questions about it?
Now I'd like to call on our.
Let me ask a question, Mr. Chairman. Is this by permit or?
No, it's just open archery. And that's mostly because it's beside Matsu, the military base. You know, they don't want firearms. So, but no, it's open. It's not permit only. Any other questions? All right, I'll turn it now over to Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. As a matter of procedure over the last several years, several of us on the land committee have gotten together to review these projects. They're voluminous and there's a lot of detail to it. And hopefully by doing so, we can skip through these things without being too laborious. But anyway, I call on our Land and Water Access Assistant Chief, Ben Solomon, to take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start off in the far western part of the state and we'll work our way east as we work through these phase 1 proposals today. Our first will be a 4,160 acre assemblage in Cherokee, Graham, and Swain counties. These tracts would be in addition to Nantahala Game Land, and they're in partnership with Mainspring Conservation Trust, as well as Open Space Institute. The approximate tax value of these tracts is just over $6 million. And we currently do not have an approximate asking price. OSI, Open Space Institute, and Mainspring are currently working to fundraise the project through various grant sources, some NIFWIF, Acres for America grants, some NC Land and Water Fund grants, as well as some federal forest legacy grants. So at this time, we do not have an asking price from either of these land trusts. The properties do have really good access, and many of these tracts do expand public access to the existing U.S. Forest Service owned game land. The assemblage does promote great connectivity in one area. I'm not sure how well you can see it from your seat, but it does link the Snowbird and Unicoi Mountains, promoting some habitat connectivity there. And there's also quite a bit of protection of headwater trout streams, and there's good potential for some brook trout restoration on portions of this assemblage. Are there any questions on the Snowbird assemblage?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question. Mark? Question. Yeah, go ahead.
On this track, this particular county, the piece at least in Graham County, it's either the second poorest or poorest county in the state, with about 76% of its land already outside of the tax base for various things, federal, state government, tribe, and such. Have we consulted or talked? Is it our policy to consult with any kind of county leaders on projects like this to ensure that they're in support? Or if not, can you talk to me about programs or what options we have now, sort of HILT type options to help counties out like that with that loss of taxable?
So in this particular situation, WRC has not talked to any of the local county governments. There's potential that OSI or Mainspring Conservation Trust have. I'm not, if they have had those conversations, I'm not aware. And that's something we could look into. I don't know that we've approached any local government before when purchasing land, but I know that is a concern in the western part of the state, as well as some of our northern coastal counties as well, where there's a lot of federal and state-owned land.
This is already in the conservancy, like.
Yeah, they're protected. I don't know.
I mean, what I'm saying is, they're already off the tax,
So they're currently privately owned.
Not off the tax roll yet.
Yeah, they're privately owned and available for purchase in these two land trusts.
Off the tax roll, but as you guys know, I mean, a lot more responsibility goes to counties for things like school construction stuff than it used to. That's not handled the same way. So anytime you take and you limit these tax bases, for small counties, especially like this, I think there has to be some consideration, at least, you know, in our process. And I agree with it's wonderful land. There's a lot of biodiversity and great assets to that, but I just want to make sure we're also considering, in my mind, a potential downside.
I guess the question is, how much money are we talking about as far as the tax basis? So will they lose?
6 million was said on the slide.
no, that's in
6
three
million
counties,
value of
right?
that property.
Over 3 different counties, correct?
Counties.
Well, it's 4,000 acres, 4,100 acres. I think about 2,000 of it's in Graham County or something like that.
Revenue.
No, 6 million. That's the tax value.
That's the value that's on the books for taxes.
Yeah, I don't know
6 million.
which, you know, how it allots, but I'm just saying.
That's my question.
Yeah, but you're talking about a county with probably an annual budget of $13 million, $11 million. I mean, that's tiny, right? Like school, sheriffs, all the things you do with that.
Every time we do that, that's an issue.
Yeah. But I think there used to
Nice
be,
that you bring it up because it is.
but I think there are avenues to help with that. I don't know what they are, and that's kind of part of my question. If we can see if there are, I think that would be a wonderful piece of this kind of conservancy puzzle that I think should be added.
Yeah, the good news is that we're getting this assemblage and it's already been put together for us. The unique part about it is that it's just a different piece of land here, and here, which we haven't seen very often put together like this. So. But anyway, we think it's good, and the real proof of the pudding will be just how much are we gonna have to pay for it. And as we take it on these phase 1 project, as you see, there's no dollar amount here. So we've got access, you might say, or some avenues of getting funding, but it's always a mystery until it comes out of phase 2, just what it's gonna cost.
Yes, sir. I think one option for us is, since Open Space Institute and Mainspring have taken the lead on this project, we can talk with them, see where they stand, if they've had any conversations with the county, and we could see what our options are there and follow up.
Yeah, I would certainly feel more comfortable that, you know, they, the tribe, and the others that have vested interest in that are at least part of the conversation.
Okay, I think we'll take them all as a group when you get finished.
All right. With no further questions on snowbird assemblage, we'll move forward to the Curtis Mountain Tract. This is in Caldwell County. This is a 168 acre property. This will be in addition to Buffalo Cove Game Land. It also ties in well with 2 other properties that we'll take a look at once we reach the phase 2s today. This particular project is a partnership with Unique Places to Save, and the tax value of the property is just over $300,000. We do not currently have an approximate asking price. Unique Places to Save has applied to some NC Land and Water Fund grants. This is a project that is highly likely to come at a very significant bargain sale or a potential donation. The property does have administrative access through Penley Road and through the adjacent Buffalo Creek headwater tracks that we'll take a look at here in a little bit for phase 2 consideration. The acquisition will protect about a ½ mile of Hickory Flat Branch that flows through Buffalo Creek. And it will also kind of fill in this puzzle piece between the Buffalo Creek headwaters project and adjacent existing game land. And staff would like to recommend phase 1 approval of the Curtis Mountain Tract, and be happy to answer any questions on this one.
The question always is just, is it gonna be a bargain sale like you insinuated here, or is this something that we're gonna have to seek out other funding?
Yes, sir. We'll find out around October, when funding decisions come out from NC Land and Water Fund.
Okay.
All right. Next up, we've got the Gillespie Gap Tract in McDowell County. This is a 840 acre property. It'll be in addition to Pisgah Game Land, and it is a partnership project with Foothills Conservancy. The tax value of the property is just over 300,000. And again, we do not have an approximate asking price. Foothills is working to fundraise for the project, and they have not presented us with a funding need at this time. The property does have direct public and administrative access off of Highway 226. The property will provide access to that Pisgah portion of Pisgah Game Land to the north that you can see on the map. Currently, that is a inaccessible portion of game land, so this Gillespie Gap project is important and from an access perspective. The tract is also within a few natural heritage natural areas. Approximately 1 mile of Martin and Conley Branch headwaters exist on the tract, and portions of the tract have recently received timber harvest. I think you can likely see that on your screen in the northwest corner of the property. Just under 100-acre timber harvest had recently occurred there. We wanted to note that. We recommend phase 1 approval of the Gillespie Gap tract. And are there any questions? All right, moving forward to the Price tract. This is a 54-acre property in Ashe County. It will be in addition to Three Top Mountain Game Land. This is a partnership project with the Nature Conservancy. The tax value is 200,000, and we do not have an exact asking price at this time, but this one will be coming to the commission at a bargain sale. Public access is through the existing game land property, existing Three Top Mountain Game Land property. Administrative access is provided through a soil road, and the property is a part of the Three Top Mountain natural heritage area. There's some rare plants that are documented on the tract, and also documented on the tract are some high quality northern hardwood forest, as well as high elevation red oak forest natural communities. And staff recommend phase 1 approval of the Price tract. Any questions?
Be really nice if we could get a bargain sale.
Yep.
Okay.
And as we talk through these properties, and I know I've mentioned these partners are fundraising and working to apply for grants, and that's why we don't have a known funding gap or a funding ask at this time. But when these properties do come to us as bargain sales, and as we get to phase 2s, when we see the volume of these properties that are coming as donations, it's oftentimes makes an easy decision for us, and it requires little financial investment up front, but there's a lot of work that has gone into these projects to have them reach this point where they're coming at a discounted price. Next up, we'll switch over to the Southern Piedmont. We'll be in Richmond County. This is a 17.7 acre property. It's the Kane tract. It is a partnership with Three Rivers Land Trust, and the approximate tax value of the property is 31,000. We would be purchasing this property at appraised value from the land trust. Access for this tract is across a small piece of private lands and through a current game lands gate. The property does share boundary with the game land on 3 sides. There's about 2,800 feet of shared boundary. It will fill an in-holding here at Sandhills. And the forest is comprised of mixed loblolly and longleaf with some scattered upland oaks. And it's worth noting that many SGCN species have been documented within a half mile of the property, including Bachman sparrow, eastern coachwhip, southern hognose snake, northern pine snake, and pine barrens tree frog. And staff recommend phase 1 approval of the Kane tract.
Yeah, that's what we want. Ideal. Move on.
This is a little bit of a different acquisition. This is an acquisition that's meeting an operations need for us. We've been searching for a site to locate the Rhodes Pond Depot that you can see on the far right-hand side of the map. That's where our existing depot is there at Rhodes Pond. This is a tract that our construction supervisor came across. It's a 6.77 acre property in Lee County. It would provide a new location for that Rhodes Pond construction crew. The tax value of the property is $344,000. And the approximate purchase price or asking price will be based on appraised value. The access is from Highway 15501 in Sanford. It's about 3/10 of a mile from the junction with US 1. The existing infrastructure on the tract includes an office building with a small shop, as well as a metal carport. The office building would be utilized by the current Rhodes Pond construction crew. We would utilize all of the buildings on the site. A couple questions that came up last week when we were discussing this is whether or not there were any underground storage tanks, any known dump sites on the property. To our knowledge and based on the staff site visit, there are no underground storage tanks, no environmental issues to be concerned with that we found during our site visit. Also important to note, the prior business that occupied this site was a trailer dealership. They're currently not in business. They're looking to sell the property. Again, just to reiterate, all structures on the property will be utilized for equipment storage, as well as space for equipment maintenance activities. Funds are in place to purchase this property if we were to land on a purchase price with the landowner. Funds have been in place for a couple of years now. We've just had a really hard time finding a suitable site with the right geographic location. Happy to take any questions with the Sanford Depot tract.
I think been looking for a long time, ever since we started refilling Rhodes Pond. It's there for the education years ago. What's the drive time from this location to Rhodes Pond? You know,
Excuse me, I didn't hear that.
road drive time, proximity to Rhodes Pond.
I don't know the drive time, but I know that we were looking to get away from the Rhodes Pond location. The crew is currently more geographically located around Lee County, Sanford. Gary Gardner may be able to speak towards that a little more.
I'm just curious, because I knew that we had a trouble to kind of close Rhodes Pond, and just have, I mean, I've had a problem with it. Good idea. Just basically, like you're right. Rhodes Pond's on the count, I said.
Oh, yeah.
And when we're buying property to build on, do we do a phase one environmental before we close on it?
It's not a requirement, but it is something we've done several different times that actually came up in our pre-meeting. It was suggested that we seek out and hire a consultant for a phase one ESA. So we'll plan to do that. I think that's a good, wise idea.
Don't always address that every time. You get a big old tract of farmland and you don't think about the old tank the guy might have had out there, but in this case, you probably do. And I would think that the AG's office would initiate that, but I'd like to know that if they do that, but I think that we should ask the question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, move on.
I have a question. The buildings advantageous to what we need. Was it? Some of them were just like shelters.
Yes, sir. There was a metal carport, which probably we'll find something to put under it, but the shop and the office building were the two things we'll likely utilize the most, and we felt they will meet our needs. Yeah.
Fill those.
Correct. Yes, sir. Any other questions? All right. We'll move forward to a boat ramp expansion project. This is at the Sneads Ferry boating access area in Onslow County. This is a 1.27 acre property. It would provide some additional parking to the existing BAA. The tax value is $344,000, and the approximate asking price would be based on appraised value. The current BAA site has 35 trailer parking spots and 8 single vehicle parking spots. Acquisition of the 2 parcels that you see outlined in red would expand parking to about 63 trailered parking spots and 33 single vehicle parking spots based on some preliminary construction designs. That's about a 200% increase in parking at the site. And one thing to note, you can see on the probably northernmost portion of the Riverside property, there is a building right there, and that building does have some just open vacant space in it. I think it's likely used as office space at this time. And it does have 2 restroom facilities, and that's typically a business that we're not interested in getting into, providing restrooms that are boating access areas. However, here, the building is in good shape. We would like to seek out some partnership opportunities with local government to see if there are any local government partners that may be interested in operating and maintaining the restroom facilities there at the boat ramp. So more to come on that. We haven't approached any local governments or local partners, but that there is some potential there.
Also on that northern face, there's obviously some piers and looks like boat slips. Are they in relatively good shape? Would we leave those or take them out?
So I'll be honest with you, I don't know that, I don't think the staff noted the condition of those existing piers. I do think we would likely keep those piers. It's probably something we would work through as we start looking at some construction designs. There's also some dry stack storage that's on that northern parcel that I forgot to mention. The dry stack storage would not stay on site if we purchased the property. The current landowner would remove that and before we purchased. But we could look into that, Commissioner Seegers, on the big stocks.
It's a great question, and we looked at what our stewardship costs would be on this. I don't remember that Jim and I talked about that, or asked this question the other day.
We'll have some stewardship estimates if this were to make it to at the phase 2 level. We'll have some estimates on stewardship.
The restroom issue, just to address that, historically, we have not operated any restrooms for all the obvious reasons and cleaning up, et cetera. But we have chose to recommend that we do that as long as we can get the county take over that. Is that the way I heard you present that?
Correct. County or some other local government partner. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
A question to go back to West. These boat slips, you thinking about, I mean, are they, do you know whether or not, does anybody know if they're leased privately owned now? Anybody know anything about them?
So,
Yes, please. Listening to the conversation here, these are brand new boat slips, and here his recommendation would be them and use them as a courtesy dog.
good, that's bonus.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay, all right, well, better check that out.
Yes, sir.
Okay, moving on.
All right. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our phase 1 presentation for today. Staff would like to recommend approval of the, I believe, 7 phase 1s that we considered and discussed.
Okay, I'd like to call a motion and a second from the committee to approve these phase 1, phase 2 projects. Leave for approval. Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, good.
All right, we'll shift gears and look at some phase 2 proposals. We have 6 to take a look at today.
So call on you to do the same thing you did last time on the phase 1s. We've got a lot of, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where we have found the money. It's been dedicated to these projects. If you don't like them, there's an issue of some sort, please speak up. Because we put off all that investigative work on the phase 1 to get financing, so to bring them to phase 2. So with that said, carry on.
We'll first look at the Dennis Creek tract in Watauga and Caldwell counties. This is a 623 acre property. It is the parcel outlined in red in that overview map that would be in addition to Buffalo Cove Game Land. And the tax value of the property is just over 2 million, and the approximate asking price is 2,671,000. The biological overview of the property is it does have a self-sustaining native population of brook trout, and the tract will protect about 1.3 miles of native brook trout habitat. Conservation of the tract will also provide protection to the Yadkin River Basin, headwaters of the Yadkin River Basin, and some tracts known to benefit and some species known to benefit that exist downstream are the brook floater, the thick-lipped chub, the snail bullhead, and the V-lip red horse. The property appraised at $3,943,100. We propose to purchase the property for a grand total of $2,671,000 using a Blue Ridge Conservancy has a land and water fund grant that they will bring to the closing table in the amount of 2.1 million. And the Wildlife Commission will bring wildlife restoration PR funds in the amount of 571,000. The estimated 5-year stewardship and revenue estimates are 21,500 for boundary establishment and gate installation. And backing up to the budget, one thing I forgot to mention, there is quite the offset there between appraised value and the total acquisition price. The landowner is offering that difference up as bargain sale, or essentially donated value. Staff would like to recommend phase 2 approval of the Dennis Creek tract. Any questions?
We move on, question. Now, who is the landowner?
So this is currently a private landowner. We're working with Blue Ridge Conservancy to purchase that tract. This is not the, we will,
I know that. It's not
Yeah.
Jeff Fisher property. I get
Yeah.
it. So, but the same question is pertinent here. I was just curious. So the Blue Ridge Conservancy is got a anonymous donor that I get you to look up on the tax card if you wanted to. It's, we're just getting this as a donation from the Blue Ridge Conservancy, basically.
that landowner is contributing that difference as bargain sale or donated value, but we will be purchasing the property at 2.671 million. We're bringing 571,000 in PR to the acquisition.
This is very special.
Yeah, no doubt.
Duly noted.
Yes, sir.
Nice job. Move on to the next one, bigger.
So the Buffalo Creek tract is a 1,260 acre property in Watauga and Caldwell counties. It is adjacent to that Dennis Creek property that we just reviewed. This property will be a possible wildlife conservation area, or in addition to Buffalo Cove Game Land. The tax value for the property is just under 6.5 million. The approximate asking price for the property is 13.5 million. And very similar biological overview that we saw on the Dennis Creek property. This property does have an existing native brook trout population in Buffalo Creek that has been protected by a small dam. Conservation of the tract would also protect headwaters of the Yadkin River Basin. And adjacent to that other conservation project, the Dennis Creek tract, in combination, both tracts would add about 9 miles of public mountain trout water to the program. The property appraised at $18.1 million, and we propose to purchase the property for $13.5 million with a federal forest legacy grant. So again, quite a bit of bargain sale offered up in this acquisition from the landowner. The 5-year stewardship and revenue estimates are 46,000 for boundary establishment and gate installation. No estimated revenue in the 5-year window, and staff recommend phase 2 approval of the Buffalo Creek tract. Any questions?
I guess we all can see very clearly what a big deal this is. $13 million worth of land comes from a Jeff Fisher Foundation or Jeff Fisher himself. And we're buying it for less than appraised value, but obviously the asking prices is still a pretty big penny. And to get another 1,260 acres up there in that territory is big. Thank you. Anybody got any questions?
Yes, sir. Quite a few roads. And Penley Road that we discussed earlier, looking at the Curtis Mountain tract, Penley Road runs through the entirety of the property. Currently, it's not DOT maintained, but it used to be a DOT maintained road that ran through the core of this property. Any other questions?
You know, this is one of the bigger acquisition gifts that we've ever had. Like this. Bigger. Stop 30 seconds and duly note, this is a big deal.
Yes, sir.
Okay, our 30 seconds is up. Let's move on.
All right, we'll move forward to the Cadell Blatco tract. This is in Richmond County. It's a 185 acre property, and it will be in addition to Sand Hills Game Land. Access to the property is from Highway 1 or James G. Watson Road. The tracts are rated as high priority acquisitions in two different conservation plans and military plans, including the 2020 Fort Bragg land analysis, as well as the NC Sandhills Conservation Partnership Conservation Plan. There's about 150 acres of very old longleaf, estimated to be over 90 years old, that exists on this tract, which is very unique. There's also protection of Hitchcock Creek headwaters with approximately 71 acres of wetlands. And of those 71 acres of wetlands, about 13 acres are classified as streamhead Atlantic white cedar forest. So a very biodiverse tract here in the Sandhills region of the state. This will be a donation from the Nature Conservancy. The 5-year stewardship estimate is $625 for staff to establish boundary and enroll this and add this to Sandhills Game Land. Any questions? All right.
Duly noted. The Nature Conservancy does it once again. They've been one of our great partners for many years. And it's another example of what they're doing for North Carolina. Okay.
Next up, we have the Loblolly Group LLC property. This is in Hope County. It's a 325 acre property that will be in addition to Nicholson Creek Game Land. Access to the property is off June Johnson Road. There are approximately 26 acres of mature longleaf that have a good native wiregrass understory. Approximately 255 acres were recently harvested by clear cut in 2012 and reforested with longleaf pine. Approximately 11,000 feet of Nicholson Creek, which is a tributary of Rockfish Creek, either borders or runs through this property. Sandhills chub has been documented in Nicholson Creek, and some other SGCN species that are known to frequent this area or have been documented on surrounding properties are Bachman sparrow, red cockaded woodpecker, Edwards hairstrike, as well as some other plant species. Again, this is a donation from the Nature Conservancy, and the estimated 5-year stewardship and revenue is $1,250 in boundary establishment and no estimated revenue in the 5-year window. The staff would like to recommend phase 2 approval of the Loblolly tract.
Any questions? Pretty straightforward. Another gift, I wouldn't call it a gift, the Nature Conservancy. We'll explain where their funding comes from some other time, but let's move on. Pretty special again.
All right, we'll move forward to the Great Dismal Swamp Restoration Bank property. This is a 2,300 acre property in Camden County. It will be in addition to the North River Game Land. Access to the tract is by boat only, and the nearest public boating access area is in Coinjock, which is about 6 miles away. The North River and Indiantown Creek constitute 11 miles of the eastern and northern boundary of this property, and most of the tract does lie within the North River Crooked Creek Wetland Significant Natural Heritage Area. And the forest on the property is primarily comprised of non-riverine swamp forest with a mixture of black gum, cypress, and red maple. This is another donation from the Nature Conservancy, and 5-year stewardship and revenue estimates are $10,625 for boundary establishment and maintenance with no estimated revenue in the 5-year window. And staff would like to recommend phase 2 approval of this 2,300 acre donation from TNC.
So I was reading something else here. So where's the funding coming from here? Or did I miss something? It's all donation.
Coming as a donation to the commission.
Years ago, we denied this property because we didn't feel like it was really worth it. Like I said, it's just holding the world together. And to have it come back around through the Nature Conservancy is a big deal. Yeah. Some due diligence years ago to help pay off. Okay, it's good.
All right, we'll move forward to a reallocation in Carteret County. This is a 128 acre island in Carteret County. This would be a new wildlife restoration area. This island is located just off on the southern tip of Cape Lookout. And the island has provided nesting, foraging, and roosting habitat for 27 bird SGCN, including the federally endangered red knot, the state endangered common tern, the state threatened black skimmer and gold-billed tern, and the state special concern American oyster catcher and least tern. The island is also suitable nesting habitat for reptile SGCN, including in federally endangered leatherback and Kemp's Ridley sea turtles, as well as the federal threatened loggerhead and green sea turtles. To date, only green and loggerhead sea turtles have been confirmed on Shark Island. So currently, this property is owned by the state of North Carolina and allocated to DOA, the Department of Administration. This will be a reallocation from NCDOA to the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. Once reallocated to the Wildlife Resources Commission, we would be in close partnership with National Park Service in our management and enforcement of public use on the property. It would be enrolled as a wildlife conservation area and a bird nesting area, if I'm not mistaken. Any questions on this reallocation?
I'm keenly familiar with this piece of property. About 70 years going to 40. That island has appeared and disappeared probably 15 times over the years. And it is highly recreated area. That's going to be interesting the way we balance between that recreation area where everybody goes out there and hangs out for the weekend, and how we restrict something because of sea turtles and nesting birds. That could be pretty problematic from a PR standpoint for the commission. So I'm not saying not do it or do it. I'm just saying that's a consideration that we need to think about a little bit. I mean, you can easily go out there and be 200, 250 people out there any week.
Well, this is the first we've heard of that. And so my question is why are we accepting this just in general? What do we bring to the table that the feds don't bring to the table? Why NCDOA?
Because the state already owns it.
Yeah, Cape Lookout can't own it. They, unlike Cape Hatteras, where it's everything above the high water mark, or actually maybe even below the high water mark for Hatteras, Cape Lookout has an actual defined endpoint. And anything past that endpoint cannot belong to the Park Service. And so it subsequently belongs to the state. And the state Department of Administration has title to it right now, as much as title exists. We're asking for it to be allocated to us so we can actually manage the wildlife. And I understand there will be some concerns, and we've dealt with that in other places. Shelley Island was another one that was highly volatile and disappeared. We actually asked for allocation for it, and then it disappeared completely. I think in the long term, Shark Island's been there a long time. What really comes and goes more than anything is the land bridge. And yeah, I understand that there will be some conflicts, and we'll try to mitigate those as best we can.
Yeah, I'm not ever aware of completely. I mean, you go to the point of Cape Lookout, Shark Island, probably pushing 2 miles. Now, I don't disagree that there's been 18 to 24 inches of water. Sometimes it's not navigable to get from one side to the other, but I'm not ever aware. Either me or some of my family's out there almost there all the time.
I think maybe I'm misspoke in terms of at low tide.
Yeah,
there's actually, you can walk to it a lot easier than you can at high tide.
You can walk to it, but your ankles are going to be wet.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
There's no clear dry land access to it. But and again, I'm not saying not doing it, but that's just a consideration. That's my only. When you say it disappeared, like you mean like I'm talking about underwater? The next hurricane that comes up right through that area, I mean it's gone. Then the next hurricane, she reappears. I mean it's back and forth. Same thing with some of the inlets that cross, because from Shark Island, it's like till you get out to actually the end of the show is like another 6 miles, and there's 2 or 3 places you can cross there with bigger boats, and that inlet or that access moves all the time. I mean, all that you've got. Sometimes you got that Labrador current that's sweeping down from Hatteras, it's coming down that way, and and the other current coming up from the south. So, I mean, it converges right there. It can be highly rough, really rough with those converging currents right there. That eats it up. I mean, you can go out there one day and it'd be 20 feet less of the island than it was the day before. You go back 2 weeks later and it's 40 feet new. I mean, it comes and goes, it moves all the time. Highly volatile. So, yeah, that's the dynamics of the piece of property. What we do with it, decide to do it, that's something different.
So Kyle,
Yes, sir.
so the state endangered common tern, threatened black skimmer, gold-billed tern, state special concern, American oyster catcher, lesser. So if that island all of a sudden goes underwater and they're not there anymore, we're gonna be held responsible for that.
No, sir. No, sir, but.
But I mean,
while
they
are
just
there,
come and
it would be
go
good for us
as
to
an
be
island
able to place
pops up.
signage to help encourage the public to give them space when they are there, but still allowing recreation. Again, this very similar to how we manage other islands off North Carolina stuff.
What you say is
We'll deal with the issue when it hits.
Absolutely. We don't want to stop recreation. We just want to protect the animals that are using it, especially those that are at risk of either being endangered or quite extinct.
And I think if we take that approach, I don't think we'll have a problem. That's why we clarify. Yeah, by the folks is, yeah, not your head. I don't think have any problem. The thing about Stark Island is a big baby comes up right up in the middle of it.
We feel reasonably sure we're not gonna be held responsible for anything that happens here. We just want to take ownership of it. That's a fair way to leave that. Let's move on.
I think we got into questions maybe.
We need a motion and second, on this, approval of the phase 2 land acquisitions.
Mr. Chairman, can you do that and take them all excluding Shark Island to do a separate vote on Shark Island?
I'm sure we could if there was justification for it. What, for the reason being?
I'm gonna vote against.
Okay.
I'll make a motion, we approve them all except Shark Island.
Okay, and there's a motion on the table. I hear a second. All in favor? So do we need a motion now to, I don't guess we do.
No, you
We
need a motion
accepted
to approve.
everything else except Shark Island. That's it.
No, that was, you can still make a motion to approve Shark Island. You just put them all-
Okay.
I didn't say not to vote on, that. My motion didn't include not approving Shark Island, just approve those five first.
Okay.
Let's clarify this. Don't think the votes on the commission, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not. Okay, I need
I'll make the motion to Shark Island. It's not longer, I'll get really educated.
We, make Shark Island approved, and accept it through the phase 2 land acquisition.
You need a second in the vote.
I need a second on that. motion. Second, here's a second, okay. All in favor on the committee? Aye.
And we'll vote on it separately tomorrow, just note that on my. So I'll remember. But I'll tell you, those boards will win with, I was surprised.
Good, okay, here we go. Yeah, I got it.
We have 3 other property matters to consider today.
And Ben will let you present that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's start off with the Green River Game Land easement request. This is a request from NCDOT. The Big Hungry Bridge here was impacted by Hurricane Helene, and this is a bridge replacement project. Henderson County, to give you some county context, the easement request is for a permanent right-of-way impacting 0.226 acres total and a temporary construction easement impacting 0.093 acres total. And the easement value will be determined by the state property office. Staff recommend approval of this NCDOT easement.
We discussed it, we looked at it, they usually get their way, I don't see any issues that we should prolong, you know. So we'll
And Mr. Chairman, when we call for a vote at the end, we'll take this NCDOT easement separate. We'll take exhibits E2 and E3 together.
Okay. Well, what's next?
I'll make a motion to approve this evening, request.
Make a motion that what?
We approve this evening request. Even one, Landon's gonna recuse himself.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second. Mr.
All
Chairman,
in favor?
Mr. Chairman. To avoid perceived conflict, I'd like to recuse myself from this vote.
Landon recusing.
We'll do that again more.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay. Let's see here, you want to take up property trade?
We have one other disposition to take a look at before we get to the city of Salisbury. So this is in McDowell County. This is a request to demolish a storage building at the Armstrong Fish Hatchery. This building has historically been used for storage and other hatchery operations. The building did sustain significant damage during Hurricane Helene, and staff believe the best action is to demolish the building. And staff would like to recommend approval of this disposition, which is a building demolition at the Armstrong Fish Hatchery. Any questions? All right, our final other. Any questions? Good, okay. Our final other property matter is a property trade with the city of Salisbury. You may remember this matter came before the lab committee in April of 2024 when we were meeting in Wilmington. There's been quite a bit of additional due diligence that's taken place since then, and we'd like to bring the matter back before the committee for consideration. And this has evolved into a property trade request. The property trade will support the city's new drinking water intake facility. This new water intake will support around 53,000 households in the area. The proposed trade is the commission would offer 15.83 acres of commission-owned game land that you see filled in green, outlined in blue on the western side of the Yadkin. And we would receive 19.64 acres of land owned by the city of Salisbury. And the city, as I mentioned, would utilize that 15.83 acres for construction of a new water intake. The commission-owned property was acquired with NC Land and Water Fund funding, as well as federal Pittman-Robertson funding, which has required us to go to those two funding agencies to request approval to dispose of this property to the city. The NC Land and Water Fund and NC Natural Heritage have reviewed and approved of this land trade. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is still under review of this proposed land trade. So today, staff are presenting this for your consideration and approval with the contingency that we only move forward with this proposed trade once we receive approval from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I have a few additional details to describe property that we have, the property that we're getting, and then I'd be happy to answer any other due diligence questions that may relate directly to the construction project. So again, the commission-owned property, just over 15 acres. We currently only have public access to that property through water. There is no public access through the state Hannah Ferry Road that runs through there. Aside from the riparian protection that tract provides, the property has very limited habitat value. There is currently very low public use of the property. The city of Salisbury property is 19.64 acres. It has great access and quite a bit of road frontage along Hannah Ferry Road. There's good habitat diversity on the tract, comprised of mixed hardwood in the uplands, and it has about a 3.25 acre woody wetland that staff are pretty excited about the waterfowl hunting opportunities that would be afforded here on this wetland. We anticipate quite a bit of public use of this city property if it were to come into commission ownership. If nothing else, due to the improved access, but also the greater habitat quality. A few things that I know came up last time when we presented this in April was the amount of due diligence that the city had completed. So I'll talk through a couple of those items. The city was awarded some federal FEMA funding for the project. The project in total is nearly a $35 million water intake project. In April, just before they were going under contract with FEMA for that funding, the funding was pulled back through an executive order. So currently they have 9 million committed from Cube Hydro and non-federal match. They have 3 million committed in City of Salisbury funds. So a $12 million total of non-federal match is secured and available. They have been, with the FEMA funding falling through, they've been redirected to NCDPS hazard mitigation grant program, which is meant for infrastructure flood mitigation funding. This project is a good fit for that. They have submitted a letter of intent for that and have received a full invite to submit a proposal for full consideration. They plan to hear back from that NCDPS mitigation grant program in September of 2025. And the project is construction ready, shovel ready, contingent on that funding, according to the city. Reasons for the city needing to relocate this project: the current pump station often experiences flooding, which in turn puts a lot of their customers with a potable water outage. This has happened multiple times a year over the last couple of years, impacting hospitals and other critical services. Their goal in this was to find a site that would allow them to build outside of the FEMA 100-year flood elevation. Our property and the elevation of our property allows them to build outside of the 500-year FEMA floodplain elevation. So the elevation of our property is one of the reasons for their strong interest in our property. Alternate routes were considered. They began searching for sites in 2007. The city hired a couple different engineering firms to seek out a suitable relocation site. 3 sites were reviewed and eventually independently reviewed from an outside firm. And the WRC property was found to be most suitable due to the property's elevation outside of the 500-year floodplain and due to its proximity to the remaining pipeline and infrastructure. That is about all of the information I have on this proposal and all of the due diligence that was completed by the city. They have completed an environmental site assessment, an archaeology report, historical structures evaluation. All of their due diligence is in place. They're currently waiting on a funding decision from NCDPS in September. They're waiting on our approval, which would be contingent on U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service approval. So quite a bit going on there. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I was the one that had a lot of problems with it from the get-go. And it's not that I necessarily have a problem with this project, is that this commission is aware of, we've had requests from other local governments before that we denied. We did not do. And if we, in the case of going forward, that we would be in a position in events that somebody was denied, that we would be in a position to have done full due diligence to have protection in the lawsuit. And then where we ended up here is a lot better than where we're at. Regardless of whether Salisbury gets their funding or not, we've got a better deal on the ground than we had to begin with, clearly without a doubt. Right. So all that other stuff was due diligence for future protections, because you remember we had one with Pender County a couple of years ago that got very controversial, went down to the wire, and we would not want to be in a position to approve one, not have done the level of due diligence here that we required Pender County at that same time. So that's why multiple conversations and emails trading forward to get the level of information. And I would hope the staff, this should be a model going forward when we deal with local governments, whether it's for or against. But clearly, that was I want to spend a couple of minutes to go through the reasons why you heard what you heard now to going forward in the future. So, but like I said, regardless of whether they come up with the money or not, we got a better deal.
Is there any reason maybe waiting to find that out?
No, I think we're fine. I think because, I think what we got on the ground is better anyway. We would then just deal with, is the water plant there or not? I think that's the way you have to look at it. At least that's my perspective. But we would have done this deal with his water intake there required, but we're already making a contingent on approval of US Fish and Wildlife. And I think that completely clears us.
I agree. I agree. Thank you for all that effort and trying to advise us on how to handle this thing because we had a lot of discussion about it. So where does that put us here? That concludes our two projects, the Armstrong deal and the city of Salisbury, correct? So I need to call a motion now and a second from the Life Committee regarding the Armstrong and the city of Salisbury. Great. And do we need to have a special motion for Salisbury since it was contingent? Or can we include that contingency in the motion?
I think we could include the contingency in the motion.
So moved. So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay. We're done. You want to do it? Go ahead, Meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Let's take a quick after lunch break and let's agree at 2:30. Take about a 15-minute break. Or we do need the whole round. I'll call to order the meeting of the Committee of the Whole, July 23rd, 2025. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. The recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.gov. At this time, I'd like to recognize Margot Minkler for a roll call of the Committee of the Whole. Margot.
To a roll call for the Committee of the Whole members, Committee Chair Mike Crump,
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Mark Craig,
Here.
David Hoyle,
Here.
John Coley,
Here.
Wes Segers,
Here.
Tommy Fumble, Tom Barry, Brad Standback, Jim Ruffin,
Present.
Ray Clifton,
Here.
Steve Wyndham,
Here.
Landon Zimmer,
Here.
John Stone,
Here.
Dave Rogers,
Here.
John Alexander, Tom Hayslip,
Here.
J.C. Cole,
Yeah.
Mike Alford,
Here.
Joe Bud, Reed Smith,
Here.
Justin Boyd.
Here.
And you have one.
Thank you, Margot. Welcome to your first official vote. Thank you for learning that today. This time I recognize Brian McCray to review U.S. Forest Service Helena Recovery Good Neighbor Agreement update.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me kick off the cow here by talking about what amounts to a career opportunity. And if that doesn't make your ears perk up, how about $300 million? All right, that got some of you. All right. So yeah, we're going to talk about the Good Neighbor Agreement. So what is this? What are we talking about? So late last year, the American Relief Act was passed. And in that act, about $6 billion, that is with a B, was provided to the national forests across the nation. Of that 6 billion, 2.2 went to the U.S. Forest Service in North Carolina. Now, this is specifically for hurricane relief. And that 6 billion was specifically for hurricane disaster relief in Florida, North Carolina, and the California wildfires. So this is all disaster relief money from the American Relief Act. So the key here is that to go into an agreement with the Forest Service, this Good Neighbor Agreement, it's a 10-year agreement, and these funds need to be obligated in 5 years. The Forest Service is, as you probably know, federal agency in a unique spot right now. They're downsizing for various reasons, and yet they have $2.2 billion to distribute and utilize for conservation. So they need to look at partners. And the way they do that is through this Good Neighbor Agreement. So the State Forest Service, the North Carolina National Heritage Program, Wildlife Resource Commission, we're all partners that are looking to help utilize these funds, as well as some NGOs like the Nation Conservancy as well. So when this opportunity came to us, we reached out to our subject matter experts and asked them, well, what restoration needs are out there on the landscape in the Western part of the state. And you've seen some of these pictures before. You've seen some of the damages from Hurricane Helene. But our staff identified there needs to be some species assessments done. There needs to be some species restoration done, habitat assessments, habitat restoration, all kinds of infrastructure, boat ramps, fishing access areas, lots of work needs to be done up in the mountains to recover from Hurricane Helene. All told, about $250 million worth of projects could be done to get us back to baseline or improve areas based on impacts from Helene. So what do we do? How do we do this? If we get $250 million, $300 million, we can't just wave a wand and say, oh, this is great, let's go do good work. We're actually proposing to stand up what we're calling a temporary division, essentially a 10-year time-limited division amounting to about 104 employees. And these employees will help be what we're calling the implementation arm of this agreement. They're the ones who will be, among other things, doing some of these pollinator plots on Forest Service property, working on culverts, working on stream restoration, the people doing the work, getting the work done. So what does that look like real quick? And unless you have binoculars, don't really expect you to read this, but we have an organization or org structure kind of laid out for this temporary division. Want to just walk through that real quick. We have a division chief, we have an administrative arm, we have some contract supervisors that'll help with administering contracts, working through the specifics of this agreement, a habitat and infrastructure assistant chief, a species monitoring and restoration assistant chief. So looking at those a little more specifically, for the habitat and infrastructure assistant chief, we have an aquatic habitat supervisor. They're going to be over an 8-person aquatic assessment team and two-person aquatic habitat restoration teams. Another wing is this habitat management supervisors. These are game land technicians that you're already familiar with. We're going to have 6 4-person teams doing the work on these lands. So again, the pollinator plots, the timber stand improvements, the culvert work, road work, gates, those are the ones that'll be doing this type of work. Also have 2 4-person construction teams reporting to a supervisor. These are like a current construction crews doing the big construction work, the significant road work, the boat ramps, public fishing areas, culvert work, stream restoration, that type of work. For the species monitoring and restoration assistant chief, they'll be over 4 different groups. We have aquatic species supervisor. They're over 2 4-person aquatic species teams. They're the ones that are going to be in the rivers and the creeks, doing the assessments, making management recommendations and management decisions. We'll have a terrestrial species supervisor, again, over 2 4-person terrestrial species teams, doing the assessments and making management recommendations. A lot of impacts to brook trout streams, so much of an impact that they need to have their specific group, and 2 4-person brook trout teams are proposed. And a lot of concerns about invasive species, so 2 invasive species coordinators to work in this group. We also have other positions that are not dedicated specifically to this division, but will work under existing arms of our agency. For example, we have conservation genetics, 3 positions, they'll report to Heather Evans. 4 fish culturists, we're talking about species restoration, fish stocking, we're gonna need some capacity to do that. So 4 fish culturists to be within our fish hatchery group already to help with some of this work. 2 engineers to report to Gary Gardner, 1 economist to report to Carrie Ruhlman. Then we have some other support staff, human resources, IT, finance, purchasing. All staff will be embedded in our current divisions, but helping with this project. And early on in this slide, you see some of these positions labeled in red. Those are the ones funded through indirect funds based on this agreement as compared to just directly funded through the agreement. So current status, we're currently working through the scope of work. We're reviewing that internally right now, trying to get it right, what we're agreeing to, what we're committing to. Once that's done, there will be a full agreement review by the commission, by the Forest Service, but then it goes into the federal pipeline. And now these funds, they were passed by the American Relief Act last year under the Biden administration. They were distributed under the Trump administration. That has some significance, but more importantly, this review does include going through DOGE. Initially, That concerned me, thought that could hold this up, could prevent this from happening. But in the long run, getting the Doge review, getting it through Doge, I think will be good for us and good for this program at the end in terms of being it fully funded and committed. We're currently working through some position descriptions. Margot's helping with that already. We're getting those in line. So when this does get signed, we can go ahead and start hiring people. Now, the hiring will be in waves and phases. We're not going to hire 104 people on day one. Start slowly, wade into this, hire the division chief, hire some leadership positions, hire a construction crew, an assessment team, get the work started, seeing how it's worked. Can we get reimbursed with these funds? How's that working? So there will be a learning curve. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be cumbersome. But what do? We're talking $300 million. Do we not do this conservation work? This is again, once in a career type opportunity. It's going to be difficult, but I think we have to do it. But then there's partner coordination as well. I mentioned State Park, our State Forest Service, Nature Conservancy. There needs to be a whole nother piece of coordination where, well, we want to work on stream X or on parcel Y. We want to make sure that the Nature Conservancy is not doing the same work in the same area. So there's got to be a large level of oversight and coordination that the Forest Service is working on right now. And so then lastly, once we get the agreement signed and everything, every I dotted, every T crossed, then we get to start hiring and start doing work. When will that be? At the very earliest, if we get this thing signed by August 11th, it could come October 1st. Likelihood of that happening is pretty low, given the amount of review that's left for this. But maybe end of this year, early next year is when we can actually start getting this done and start doing the work. That was pretty quick. That was a high level review of where we're at. Still a lot of review left, a lot of coordination left. But again, this is agency changing right here. Might be a temporary change, 10 years, but this is, as we've heard a few times today, this is a big deal. And just want to see if y'all have any questions, any thoughts on this, and happy to entertain. Commissioner Wyndham.
You saying we're gonna go out and we're gonna hire people on a 10-year contract?
Essentially, yes, sir. And that will be known at the onset.
Essentially, man, that's the.
Well, a contract, it's not, we're going to hire them and we're going to hire them and it's going to be advertised as a temporary 10-year position. It's not going to be a contract. They will be a full-time employee for us after a given amount of time. So it's not a contract, but yes, we're hiring brand new people.
10 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I'll follow up on Steve's question. I mean, and are you gonna be able to source that skill set with that limitation?
So,
I mean, have you tested the waters there and could we outsource that?
So we haven't tested it yet. We're going to wade into this slowly to see how it goes. We do think that current employees who are aging towards retirement, this might be an opportunity for some of them to take on before they move into retirement.
I didn't think of that. I didn't. That's a good answer.
You have a question, Lynn?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I guess it's time to get greedy, but are we asking, I mean, what we're asking for is what we need? Do we need to ask for more or?
That's a good question. We think we're asking for what we need, but this agreement can be modified. So if things change in the year, in 2 years, we can ask for more, we can ask for less, we can change the scope.
So why would existing employees do that? What you just said, why would they opt into this?
Some of this will be a promotional opportunity for a number of employees, and they will take that opportunity to better their salary for their long term.
So if they were 20 years here and they could finish out a career 10 years in a promotion type salary, it would make sense for them to do that. Isn't that correct, Brian?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Right, what? I know it's the federal government. What's the odds they say, yep, money's here? I mean, we're gonna get it 25 million a year for 10 years, or are they gonna hand us 250 million and we get to spend it over 10?
No, good question. And that is a concern. That's probably the biggest fear among existing staff and us. What is it possible this money will get clawed back? We just saw it happen a week ago. These are disaster funds, and talking to leadership of the Forest Service, they've never seen disaster funds get clawed back. This is not a upfront cost, though. There will be some costs we can ask for upfront payment for equipment, for example, but the rest will be reimbursement. And so it will be a pay-as-you-go, like a number of our other projects and other agreements.
Brian, did you guys have this extremely thorough and well thought out and for, as a lot of you know, having a thorough, exhaustive sort of plan like this does increase your odds of getting more money, and the fact that you've done that. So I appreciate that aspect of it. But that's a lot of people. And just out of curiosity, any idea on budget, like what we're looking at over 10 yards or 10
So
years?
for people, if we hired 104 people from day one over 10 years, we're talking about $50 million. So that it was about $250 million worth of projects and about $50 million worth of salary over 10 years.
And my last question, other than our enforcement officers, how many employees does our agency have in those fields now?
In those fields now, well, we have, well, this would be our second largest division as an agency, outside of enforcement and land and water access division.
So, right, so I think, I mean, we'll be able to draw people from South Carolina because they're not getting the disaster relief money. So, I mean, we would have the ability to pull biologists and whoever else from South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia. I mean,
Yes, sir.
I don't think staff would be a big deal.
And again, with the federal government downsizing, I think there are people out there looking for these type of jobs.
Yes, sir.
So I'd just add, yes, we will, but we'll also see a lot of folks, probably young folks applying for especially some of these entry-level positions, because it gives them 10 years to get their foot in the door, knowing that there are going to be other retirements in state system or other state systems where that experience is really going to help them get into that full-time permanent position after. And the big thing is there's no match required. So this is all 100% federal money. There would be no state cost on us.
Any further questions?
So one
It's almost too good to be true, but we still got to get a group.
We've kind of thought that all along, but yes. Yep.
Absolutely got to pursue it. What other question?
Are we getting all the money up front or not?
No, sir.
No.
It's a reimbursable, but the Forest Service, North Carolina, National Forest of North Carolina has the money. It's not sitting in DC. It's with the National Forest of North Carolina.
It's so been dispersed.
It's according to them,
It ain't in our check.
yeah, they can't give it to us upfront.
How much can they give us?
Really, essentially none. I mean, other than we can get, like, say we're gonna buy 100 trucks. We could ask for that money up front, but then we're not gonna draw any more money from them until we've essentially have all those trucks paid. So it's generally a rolling, just like our PR and DJ, our fish restoration and wildlife restoration funds that we use. That's the exact same way they operate.
So that money's set aside for us, so they can't spend that money until we ask for it.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. It'll be set aside for us, obligated to us. As we spend it every month, we'll ask for a reimbursement and they'll reimburse us. And that all happens electronically.
John, you have a question?
I was just say, so the federal government puts stipulations on the National Forest Service on what it can be used
Yes, sir.
for.
And
that's what they agreed to.
That we've reviewed and
Yes,
looked
sir.
at, and it fits what we.
Yes, sir. This is all we were asked. What would we do on the forest as part of recovery, and not only for species and habitats, but for recreation? And so that list of activities are the activities our staff thought were important to accomplish.
And that agreement will come back to the commission before we do. So you can see the whole work plan be finalized, as you said in your presentation, correct? We will have that in front of us before we go forward.
So,
We can.
U.S. Forest Service has got a whole list of jobs that they've already agreed that they would do. They don't have the money to do it. I'm assuming that would fall in place and this would fund those projects.
So they're not driving, the Forest Service isn't driving the projects that are on our list. We're driving them. We're the ones saying, these are the projects we want to work on.
Well, some of those projects would be wonderful for us.
Right, and those we may very well have included in this. So if it's a linear wildlife
So they don't
opening.
dictate what happens. We do. We could choose those projects.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I mean, simplify, they asked us what our wish list would be, and we gave it to them for $300 million. We created what we're going to include, put in this agreement that they'll fund.
They've agreed to
y'all
so much
absolutely
habitat
see the
enhancement. They've agreed to so much habitat enhancement work up there that they just, over the last 3 or 4 years, they haven't been able to do anything.
Well, and we know that NEPA and the federal red tape is gonna slow things down some. But they know that as well. I've talked personally with the new chief of the Forest Service, Chief Tom Schultz, about this project. He's on board with it, and this would be, at least according to the Forest Service folks I've talked to, probably the largest good neighbor agreement in the history of the Forest Service.
Big deal.
So I do want one point of clarification. So we've signed 3 or 4 of these good neighbor agreements in the past. When I said the commission would review it, I meant staff would review it.
Y'all will get to.
If we're going to be letting the chairman, vice chairman.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah.
Any further questions?
Yeah, just one. Just want to make sure I understand. I'm sure you crunch these numbers too, Brian, but if it's 50 million in payroll over 10 years, $5 million a year, 104 employees, that'd come out to about a salary of about $48,000 a piece. Does that sound right to you?
Um,
Something wrong? That was include burden and everything on it.
right. We've got fringe and benefits all factored in.
Right.
That, 50,000 per salary doesn't quite sound right, but it is varying between technicians to division chiefs. So across the board, maybe that's not far off.
Seems low.
Any further questions? Here now, we'll move on. I'll recognize, Commissioner Jim Ruffin to do a restoration working group update.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Chairman. Since our last meeting, we went back and have realigned our focus a little bit. And so we're looking at focusing on Caswell Gangland, which we already have the project for restoration going on there. We're looking to see if there are ways that we can improve or enhance that project. And if not, then it's going the right way anyway. So we're doing good work up there already. We're also working on compiling a list of resources that are presently available to private landowners to help them create and maintain early successful habitat. And one of the methods that we're working on will actually be on our website. It'll be a portal, I think, won't it, Kyle, where we can actually, people can go online and almost vet themselves through a series of questions and show them what the best options are that are available, public funding or whatever, resources available for them for their efforts. And also give them ability to contact us to come help them with it too. But it does some pre-vetting for us as well, which I think will help a lot of our field staff. If we get that up and running. And then finally, the last thing we were asked to do was to go back, okay, we've got these other game lands out there. We're not going to do anything with them anytime soon. But if we were, let's identify one that we might go to next to Caswell with a great success. We want to do another one, where would we go? So that's what we're working on.
Thank you for that update. Or any questions? Appreciate that. Jim. We'll now move forward. I'll call on Will Casola to go over permanent rulemaking notice of text. Haynes Range Gangland, Furbear propagation, readoption, Wildlife Service Agency agreement soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm presenting permanent rulemaking notice for 3 different sets of rules. First, we have Paynes Branch Gameland. This is 10D0295, Exhibit I1 and I2 in your package. The proposed rule would establish Paynes Branch Gameland as a brand new gameland in our system. The Commission, in partnership with the Conservation Fund, the National Wild Turkey Federation, and the North Carolina Wildlife Habitat Foundation, acquired 209 acres in northern Forsyth and southern Stokes County. The property is located in a region of the state where few public hunting opportunities currently exist. And the proposed rule will establish this property as a 3-day per week gameland, set requirements related to deer seasons, and prohibit horseback riding and target shooting. Staff will be recommending publishing notice of text with an open comment period and public hearing. Are there any questions on Paynes Branch Gameland?
Question. Hearing none, go ahead.
Second, we have fur bearer propagation rules. This is 10H 1100, Exhibit J1 and J2. The proposed amendments update the framework for fur bearer propagation in North Carolina, and these updates are based on recommendations from Fur Commission USA and the U.S. Fox Shippers Council. These are the industry standards that are required to sell furs on the international market. And so there's currently not any licensed fur bearer propagators in the state. However, improving these rules will ensure any future licensees meet the caging, welfare, and biosecurity standards set by the industry, and it helps us better ensure that this license is not used to hold fur bearers as pets. I'm going to briefly run through the changes on each of the rules. First, we have 1101, which is the fur bearer propagation license. The updates would clarify that only species designated on the license can be propagated, removes our website from the rule as the application is not available online, and it requires licensees to report their date of birth and certification of up-to-date rabies prophylaxis. And this change is consistent with the recently adopted changes to wildlife captivity and rehabilitation. Next, we have 1104, which is minimum standards for caging and care. The changes update the caging requirements for mink and fox based on industry recommendations. They clarify that clean drinking water must be provided daily. They improve biosecurity and human safety standards related to fencing, food storage, waste removal, quarantine, disease testing, visitation, and deceased animal disposal. And lastly, they require rabies testing and pre-exposure prophylaxis, similar to our updates to the wildlife captivity and rehabilitation rules. And last, we have 1107, which is updates to the records and inspections rule. This would update annual reporting requirements such that they're consistent with those in our rehab and captivity rules, and it clarifies that pelts sold and that animals that either died or were euthanized would be reported on annual records. Staff will be recommending publishing notice of text with an open comment period and public hearing. Are there any questions on the new fur bearer propagation rules?
Question? Hearing none.
Okay. And third, as part of our periodic rules review, we have changes to wildlife service agents. This is 10G 0400, Exhibit K1 and K2 in your packet. These rules are required to be readopted by December 31st of this year, and many of the changes improve clarity and conciseness of the rules. We have 0401, this is the purpose of the wildlife service agent. This rule is proposed for repeal, and the definition would then be moved to 1402. In 1402, changes include defining the business information required from the applicant, and it would prohibit applicants with convictions for financial crimes within the previous 5 years from receiving a wildlife service agent appointment. Lastly, it would require agents to have a computer, printer, internet access, and provide documentation related to the transfer of funds to the commission. Changes to 10G 0403, Wildlife Service Agent Agreement. This rule is proposed for repeal, and the important components are moved to the relevant parts of Rule 0402 and 0405. 10G 0405 is the Wildlife Service Agent Terms and Conditions. The updates would require agents to maintain $5,000 in agent transactions annually. It outlines the terms and conditions for agreement cancellation, and it moves termination suspension rules to 0406. And lastly is 10G 0406, which outlines appointment termination. These rules are moved from 0405, like I mentioned, and we update the rule language for clarity and conciseness. Staff will be recommending publishing notice of text with an open comment period and public hearing. Are there any questions on wildlife service agents?
Any questions for Will reference wildlife service agents notice of text? Hearing none. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Move forward now. I recognize Kyle Briggs with a suggestion for amended commission schedule 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Exhibit C for tomorrow. Currently, we're looking for a potential change in our remaining commission meetings. Currently, our next scheduled commission meeting is Thursday, October 2nd. There's a requested change to move that to Thursday, October 16th, due to a conflict with Wine Wheels and Wildlife, which is a very important conservation event that happens on October 1st. And so that is our recommendation, again, to move from October 2nd to Thursday, October 16th. Be happy to take any questions.
What are the feelings of the commission on that?
I'll be out of the country on the 16th. My apologies, sir.
Same.
Works for me.
I'll be gone too.
So when we vote on it tomorrow, we got a majority that's going to support us.
I think that event's worth us moving the.
I mean, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure we got consensus from everybody to move this thing forward tomorrow. We understand we change this date. Cool with it, right?
We change it to 15th and 16th. And Coley can't be there. That's a win-win, right?
I can actually make the committee.
I'm good with that.
I can actually make the committee, meeting, so I just, the important part, I just filed.
But I'm assuming we're cool with that. Everybody's fine. Is there any objections now? Everybody's had nothing to say. We'll move forward on the agenda for tomorrow. Thank you, God. And at this time, every 2 years, the general statutes, note that we elect new leadership, which includes the chairman and the vice chairman. And in just a few minutes, or just a couple of moments, I'm going to open the floor for nomination for chairman and then nomination for vice chairman and chairman. 2-year terms till the next biennium. And under Robert's Rules of Order, which we go by the general statutes, nominations do not require a second. So when I open the floor, make nominations that we want to put on the floor, we will close. Then we'll, after the nominations, we'll have I'll entertain a motion to close the nomination. Then we will make a selection to move forward to tomorrow. So at this time, I'm going to open the floor for nominations for chair, and I'm going to open that with a nomination, Mark Craig, the next chairman. Wallace. You have one on the floor. Are there any more? Got a motion, and you need a second on that.
Second.
Got a motion, second to close nomination. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of closing the nominations, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Nominations are closed. This time I'm going to open the floor and accept nominations for the position of vice chair.
Nominate my good friend Landon Zimmer.
And his name has been second. We didn't need a second.
I make a motion, we close nomination.
Okay, we got a motion on the floor to close nominations. And a second, we got those who made it what?
Was the second Rogers?
Yeah. Okay. Is any further discussion, comments, consideration there?
Is Landon going to dinner tonight?
Anyway, so let's get back to business at hand. All those in favor of closing nomination, signify by chair, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We'll carry 2 nominations for tomorrow for the vote. Mark Craig, chairman, Landon Zimmer for vice chair. Thank you all very much. Housekeeping, I've made reservations for the Federal Steakhouse tonight. At 6 o'clock, so we'll need to leave the hotel maybe about 5:30. Traffic, what I need, because I've got to call at 4 o'clock for a reservation. So please give me a show of hands who wants to go tonight, so I can make sure I've got reservations right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10, 8.
I don't plan to make it.
Okay, so I'll make, I got to go. Good at 10. So we'll meet in the lobby about 5:30. We'll meet us there. We'll be good to go. Is there any other mission? Mission come forward to me to hold at this time. Here none. See everybody.